as we're about to get started and dive into our community spotlight. Can take a quick minute, give a brief introduction on who we have joining us, so that he can dive right in. And so this morning we have Sticks, Brandon, but who's also known as Sticks, is a good friend of mine, and he is the founder of the Think Watch Foundation, which is a 501c3 organization that primarily focuses on community grassroots activations, along with developing financial literacy programs, custom container housing solutions, charitable fundraising, just to name a few of the many things that the organization does. He himself was born and raised in Watts, California, and he's worked his way to become a very well-known rapper, record producer, songwriter, and an overall entrepreneur over the last 16 years. His involvement with music was just a jumping off point to his true passion for advocacy and giving back to the community through his foundation. So he's definitely a staple of the community, and has formed an extreme amount of deep community relationships that really bridges the community to some of its professional residents who are housing in the community. Professional residents, including LAFC, the Clippers, the Rams, and a lot of other large organizations who have been trying to find ways to really give back and get connected to the community. Think Watch does a lot. I'm sure he's going to touch on it, so I won't even go down the list of what they've been able to give back to the community. But the best is definitely yet to come with what they're doing out there. And yeah, we're really, really excited and grateful to have him on today to be able to share what it is he does and with the community that he's giving back to, what they need, and hopefully how us as architects, designers, students, and just allies in this profession could be able to join in and lend our expertise and even just our time and our bodies to what it is that they have going on. And I think that was the perfect time bio, because it is exactly 8:15, and so I'll give it over to Sticks.
Wow, do I need to say anything? That was like amazing. No, I am very thankful and grateful to be here. My background, you can't tell, but I'm sitting outside, so forgive me. It's trash day if a trash truck drives by. I am very authentic, and I will speak what comes to my mind, as we all are. As creatives, we tend to speak whatever just comes to the top. In my world of music, we call it freestyle, obviously. So thank you everyone for joining. It's amazing to see everybody from, all over the country coming in to tap into this amazing event. I'm not gonna lie, when Josh hit me up, he was like, yeah, man, I see, he sent me the information. And he was like, yo, I want you to be a part of this thing. I honestly didn't even know what it was. I just said, yeah, for sure. I was in the middle of doing like an event in the community. I was like, yeah. So true story. I called him yesterday and I was like, hey man, what is this thing that I'm doing again? He told me, and I was like, oh yeah. This is fire. I'm in. That's going down. And so shout outs Tibby too. Much respect to Tibby as well. And I'm just grateful to be here. So I'll kick it off. I founded a company called Think Watts and a foundation called Think Watts Foundation. My background is I guess I got to rewind a little bit. If anyone that's from Los Angeles County and is as old as I am, I'm 37 years old, but back in like the early 2000s, there was a dance movement called crump dancing. I'm one of the co-founders of the crump dancing movement. The movie Rise happened because of David LaChapelle called me to get all of the dancers in the movie. And I didn't want nobody to do it because he wasn't paying us. So, but everybody did it anyway. But I guess the story continues. I'll do a documentary one day. So it went from there to music. I end up being able to make some moderate success from the music business via touring with the likes of Snoop Dogg and the Kendrick Lamars and J-Rocks. And I'm also responsible, and I developed the artist Iggy Azalea, co-produced and wrote all of her music. And, that was my ticket. I don't like to say ticket out of Watts because I'm still there. I'll never leave it. but that was a opportunity to develop that was a way to develop new opportunities for myself. And moving forward, I wanted to build a brand that represent more than just who I am, because I've always been about serving. I've always been about people. I've always been about recognition and recognition of something impactful. So I started Think Watts. It was the first thing that came to mind. And what Think Watts was all about was Watts is about power. And I have this saying, if you think watts, you think of electricity. If you think of electricity, that means you have a light bulb. If you have a light bulb, that means you have an idea. And if you have an idea, you can change the world. Hence why on my hat, we have the tower. The Watts Tower represents the light bulb that generates the idea that creates change. So just giving everybody a little context on like who I am, my foundation. Man, what don't we do? Humbly and respectfully, we do everything from weekly food drives, donating thousands of food boxes weekly. We do we do specialty innovative food drives where just recently for Women's History Month, I contacted multiple women businesses owned by women, and I would buy 300 meal items at their retail price and distribute them to the community, because that way we're serving the community and we're supporting small businesses owned by women. So we look at different ways to support businesses in regards to food drives and food distributions, addressing food insecurities in low-income communities. We also do financial literacy, where we teach money management, credit, introduction to stocks, bonds, mutual funds, mutual funds. And we've just recently added buying and selling real estate and entrepreneurship setup. And we've been granted the green light to develop the financial literacy curriculum for all of the schools in Watts. So starting in middle school, going all the way through high school, I'm developing, and Think Watts Foundation is developing the curriculum that will be implemented, that will be here forever. So I think financial literacy is key, but that's a whole nother conversation. We're also addressing permanent supportive housing in regards to, homeless crisis, but we have a strong focus on ex-offenders, focusing on the recidivism population, figuring out ways to get them back on their feet, get them in the housing that they can afford, because a lot of them really need a second chance. So, and they're really ready to attack the world in a positive way. So we focus on those individuals. We also have a strong focus on, we're building something interesting, and that's when I guess I would pull up my last second presentation that I put together. Hold on, I can share my screen? Okay, cool. I'm like an architect because I put my presentation together at the last second. Oh, give me 2 seconds. Oh wait, here it is. Cool. Oh, PowerPoint. Y'all can see my screen? Everyone?
Yep.
Cool. All right, Think Watts, 30/30 vision. Why 30/30 vision? I'm not looking to do what I'm doing for Watts for the next 5 years or the next 10. I'm thinking of the next to far beyond what Watts will be when I'm no longer here and my grandkids are no longer here. What is Watts going to be? What is it going to look like? And who will be the stakeholders that still maintain and preserve the history of Watts? For individuals who don't know, there's a research that has went out, and Watts has produced more impactful and iconic figures than any other territory in the entire world. The closest thing to the amount of impactful figures that have been produced is Egypt. This is just to give you context of how powerful a 2-mile square radius area is. Just to name a few small figures, there was Florence Griffin Joyner, the Olympic gold medalist. There is Charles Mingus, the jazz musician. That was the music that was playing earlier. There is the Watts Prophets, the founders and creators of rap, not hip hop, but rap. The Watts Prophets, Born in Watts, Charles Wright, 103rd Street Band, creators of Express Yourself, and it goes on and on and on. And there's other people in different fields that have done amazing things for society. So knowing that, we go into, without making this a deep history lesson, Watts, during the second migration, was where all African Americans locate. They went to Watts for freedom. During the second migration, they migrated to Watts, was the word that I was looking for, excuse me. And the population quickly rose from, we're talking about 20,000 to about 200,000 people over the course of a couple of years. So anyhow, without drawing it out, Watts immediately became the hub for African Americans to find resources, to find success. But due to the systemic practices that were put in place, like the covenant that wouldn't allow us to buy real estate outside of Watts, they were able to create systems that oppressed, right? So now I think of where Watts is today, why it is today, and what the future can hold due to the changes that all of our minds, like who've come together today. We are ready to see change. We are ready to produce change. And all it takes is for minds like this to come together to develop these resources, right? To develop the ideas that can change the world, all pun intended. So Watts 3030 vision, what are we talking about? It's reimagining certain locations that are in Watts that have a historical meaning, a historical significance, a historical just history of arts, culture, that the people were heavily impacting the world right there in this place called Watts. One of the locations was the Mafundi building. Mafundi building is home of the Watts Writers Workshop, and people obviously feel free to look it up. They did script writing classes. There was poetry classes. There was playwriting. There was music. There was all of these different arts and culture classes that were accessible to the community to develop and create their own expression, right? We have locations like this that need to be preserved, that we could redesign and develop into the next wave of these arts and culture classes. Then we have, you see the Watts train station is a strip of land that's huge, that unfortunately going through some political conversations, but I have positive hopes that we can address that and add that to this strip of this Watts 3030 vision, which I will explain. Real quickly, I'll show this.
I don't mean to interrupt. Can you put it in slideshow view so we can see the beautiful images?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine.
And I'm gonna get up really
Just
fast.
play slideshow. Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh,
sorry to interrupt.
I need to plug my, this is gonna be very unprofessional. I need to plug my laptop up. I don't want it to die. One second, sorry, everybody. Okay, all right, now, so that's once again, that's the Mafundi building, Watts train station. This is near the Watts Towers, reimagined by a good friend, Demar Matthews. He has this amazing concept of this space that he's been working with. And Demar is a Los Angeles architect, talented young man. And we've been discussing what this area near the Watts Towers, how it can be reimagined. But the reason why I'm showing you these images is these are locations that we can connect and introduce this new Watts Reimagine. So what's at Watts Reimagine, right? The Watts curriculum is something that I created. I woke up one day and put it together. And the W stands for wealth management. We need a hub where we can consistently empower our people with wealth management, like how we said, financial literacy, credit building, introduction to stocks, things that can equip us with the education to understand what to do with our income as it comes in so we can put it in the right places to develop more opportunities financially. We have art, makerspace, serving, we talking about sewing machines, embroidery machines, silk screens, things like that, other clothing related products, anything in regards to art, designing, architecture, anything in regards to the art of creating. That's what the A stands for in Watts. The T is tech lab, like immersive technology, AR, VR, we need to be teaching C++, Java, Python, things like that, that pretty much fuel our economy on all of our different platforms that we use on a daily. We have training, job training, sports training, anything that has to do with career training. That's what the other T stands for. And then sports. Obviously, we know how talented individuals are all throughout Los Angeles County, but a heavy focus on the sports, developing the skills, performance, rehabilitative training, and putting all that together, that stands for Watts. Now, Watts 30/30 vision. Watts 30/30 vision will become the next Silicon Valley. The innovation of creative arts, fashion, environmental, enhanced local technologies, home of new architects, music, fashion technologies, essential good technologies. We will be developing companies compiled of diverse architects focused on the development of new retail, residential housing, and commercial skyscrapers, dedicated to the touch and feel of all disenfranchised individuals. All buildings will incorporate immersive technologies that cater to the needs of urban communities. Music, I'm talking about building music studios, arts platforms, arts equipment made by diverse creatives that produced enhanced quality and dynamics to maximize recording, listening, music production, and fashion development outcomes. And I'm talking about creating new microphones, the technology that goes into microphones. How can we make them better? Speaker systems, music programs like the Abletons and the Pro Tools, sewing machines. Let's come up with new ways to develop our own synthetic cottons and poly and silk and different things like that. I'll dive a little bit more into the NFT thing. That's, we'll get into that. Products and software, blockchain technologies, enhance lifestyle, low income, to enhance the lifestyle of low income, disenfranchised residents, bringing these cohorts under this hub to develop POS systems, cloud-based services, new personal computing. I truly believe our people in these communities can develop the next Apple or the next Mac, the next Microsoft, et cetera. Essential startups, operating systems, interface, input, output, innovation. What does that mean? Like, what does that look like? I believe we can build that. I believe we can build the next level and layer of technology coming right out of the community of Watts. New machines and technology that creates perfect climate and weather bubbles for 365-day farming. Can we create enhanced, greenhouses or some type of invisible layer, a bubble that can make sure that we fight towards eliminating food deserts in all of these type of communities? That's the idea. Filtration systems, which we're already installing, to purify contaminated water, cycling through contaminated pipes in low income and underserved communities. True story, we're before this started, Jaden Smith's company, 501c3, partnered with Think Watts Foundation, and we are installing these small water filtration systems all throughout Watts. And basically, for those who don't know, in Watts, there's a LA County study that says you lose 12 years of life living in the city of Watts due to the water because of the amount of lead and toxins and impurities that's coming through the piping. So because of this, I wanted to immediately address the crisis, and we started installing these filtration systems, and we installed our second one yesterday, and we're doing a big thing for Earth Day today, and it eliminates 100% of the impurities and the toxins and lead from the piping system that's coming through the pipes in Watts, and it pumps out fresh filter water. So that's something to be grateful. It's about developing the bigger systems just like that and installing them in these communities. Eco-friendly machines built with technology that adopts the process of photosynthesis to produce oxygen and clean air in low-income populated neighborhoods. As we know, in areas like Watts, et cetera, the air quality is also very poor. So the idea is to develop these type of systems that we could figure out how to produce better air quality. But long story short, that is the Watts 3030 vision, and is taking these areas of land in these already historical buildings that already exist in Watts, and building this crescent, building this kind of arc where we redesign, redevelop these hubs to create this incubator, create this idea and bring it to life. And so thank you everybody for hearing me speak. I guess that's my presentation. And I appreciate everybody's time, and thank you everybody for coming out today.
Thanks so much, Six. Thank you very much. That the vision is great, and it's definitely one that's needed, and you're talking to who hopefully is the group of right people to help get that going over the next year in the city that we all work and build in. So we really appreciate that. If you all want to check out more of what he does, Will dropped his link inside the chat, but also if you go on over to the WOVA app, there's ways to interact with what he's talking about, check out what the things they're doing, and we can have different topic discussions going on there. But yeah, thank you very much. And with that, I mean, it's a perfect intro into the first panel that we're going to get going on soon. And so we're really appreciative of that. And yeah, so I'll kick it over to Will Wright, and he'll introduce our president of AIA, and we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh and Sticks. That is really exciting. I'm really excited to learn about Watts Foundation and Think Watts and the long-term strategy you have. That's beautiful. Well, right now it is my pleasure. This is our 5th annual Encompass conference. It is my pleasure to welcome Wade Killifer, the president of AIA Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Wade.
Glad to be here, Will. Welcome to the 5th annual AIALA Encompass Inclusive Architecture Conference. This virtual conference is a collaborative effort between AIA Los Angeles and Segal NOMA, and has been organized by the leadership of our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, a community that's nested within both organizations. The JEDI committee was formed last year to collectively respond to the systemic challenges, inequities, and unfair and often brutal hardships impacting our communities of color and afflicting the very roots of our profession. Moving forward, justice must be at the forefront of everything we do. As a 2-day virtual event with the mission to increase urban equity and resilience in the communities we serve, our goal with this conference is to strengthen diversity and inclusion in the AEC professions, as well as in the academic programs that provide pathways to careers in architecture and design. When we first organized Encompass 5 years ago, our focus was procurement reform for more inclusive outcomes and best practices in hiring and assembling diverse teams. The AIA National had just released the Equity in Architecture Commission report, and this led to the launch of our EDI Best Practices Guide. Our conference speakers demonstrated the added value of diversity and how inclusive firms outperform other less inclusive teams. We then expanded on our focus on ways to add empathy and integrity to the design process and the power of personal stories to help bring stronger mentor and protege partnerships. Last year, we showcased opportunities to better support career pathways to the architecture profession and to establish more direct connections to historically Black colleges and universities. This year, we're pleased to include and pay tribute to the leadership of 2 community-based nonprofit organizations, Think Watts Foundation and Friends at Mafundi. And we encourage you to support them with a direct contribution. Will Wright will add their links to the chat box. Today, Our speakers will share insight about the power of including the voices of the community in our design process, and will focus on our beloved Watts neighborhood. We will also take a deep dive on the Socal NOMA DEI challenge, which is a 10-point plan that delivers a pathway to diversity for Los Angeles architecture firms through mentorship, recruitment, promotion, and pro bono services to underserved communities. Tomorrow, we will hear about equitable contracts, inclusive procurement, and better ways to understand the DEI perspectives and voices in the communities we serve. We encourage all firms to commit to the Socal NOMA DEI challenge because the disparate impacts of the pandemic have placed in stark relief our urgent need to diversify the AEC profession and attract and encourage more people of color to pursue careers in architecture. The urgency of justice for all requires our immediate action. Let us be the change we want to see. We want to thank the JEDI committee leadership who helped to program this conference: Josh Foster, Leslie Sidor, Janelle Brooks-Petty, Renee Rodriguez, Ziba Gassimi, and Carmen Suero. Thank you very much. Will now recognize the 2021 Encompass sponsors. It is with their generous support that the AIA Los Angeles is able to deliver programs and initiatives that are vital to the health of the architecture profession and the communities which we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. We could not do this type of programming without the generous support of several architecture and engineering firms and construction companies. So with that in mind, I want to spend a moment to share recognition for Cumming Corporation, which was our presenting sponsor. And we have 3 champion sponsors this year. We have HNTB, Anderson Barker, and Steinberg Hart. And our student scholarship sponsor, which allowed us to make this conference available to as many people as possible, was NAC Architecture. I'd also like to make sure we recognize the Friends of Encompass, Co-Architects, IBI Group, SRK, Uniball, Rodamco Westfield. You guys all know the Westfield, Woods Baggett, Walter P. Moore, and ZGF. We also have the generous support of so many participating sponsors. We have AC Martin, Bellsburg Architects, Bester Architecture, Clark Construction, Clune Construction, EYRC, Fur Studio, Hanson LA, HKS, KFA, PCL Construction, Plenary Americas, Swinnerton Builders, and Webcorp Builders. What all this generous support means to me is that the AIA can focus on programs that matter to the communities. And with that, I look forward to Day of Encompass. And with that, we will also pay recognition to all of our annual sponsors that really do allow us to operate with the integrity that we do as a chapter. The architecture community here is coming together like no other to really advance our mission to improve our neighborhoods and to make life in Los Angeles more beautiful. So with that, we'll go to the first program. Joshua and Carmen, thank you for leading us so far. So
Thank
Renee,
you.
are you ready for the next session?
Oh, I think you are on mute. I see you talking.
There you go. All right.
Perfect.
I can't see myself. It's, you know, we have to adapt still. Hopefully just a little bit longer, guys. You know, we could have asked for a better introduction to our theme, because actually our point and what came in as a sort of as a thought was the importance of our work as designers and design professionals to sort of amplify those voices and make sure we connect with the right people whenever we're doing a project and sort of recognize the impact of that project. So the question we pose is, how can design and development embrace, empower, and amplify voices within a community? So we attempt to sort of focus on the idea of community design, and making sure that it's clear that community design is not a community meeting or sort of us going into community and providing our best design skills. But it really is a different type of practice that came out in the 60s, and a lot of you guys know, but we thought it was important to talk about it. Based on the idea that professional knowledge or technical knowledge is mostly adequate to deal with social problems. And so we have to really embrace this discussion with all the stakeholders, sort of planners, architects, people who deal with social architecture, people like Sticks, who are entrepreneurs and really committed to the communities, to make sure that the people who live in a certain environment have an impact in the environment that we as builders and designers actually implement, which is why in our panel, and I'll let everyone sort of introduce themselves a little bit, but we thought it was really important to have different facets of our profession as designers involved. There's a striking group that's missing from our panel, but it's because we can't cover everything in one side. So hopefully this is just a primer on what the mission should be. And obviously we're talking about community people. There are other panels that are talking about that, but I guess this is a challenge to us as designers. How can we serve as tools to amplify those voices? So in our group today, we have Demar Matthews, sort of young architect that, has been spoken about before. We have DJ Segal, which is also an architect who's been working on the Watts neighborhood for a long, long time. Marco Ramirez, who is representing developers, but he's a community advocate, who's making sure that he's connecting sort of the right people within a community. And Ivory Rose Chambesi, who is from the policy side, but as well she's managing the Watts Rising program. So the idea is that we have in policy, design professionals, and community advocates kind of talking about how we can really work much better at connecting with communities to make sure that we sort of, at the end of the day, we have to design those projects. We have to make those projects reality. But how can we make sure that those projects represent the voices of the community rather than sort of have the sort of, let's call it the goal that we know better. So with further ado, I would like to sort of open the floor to my panelists so they will introduce themselves and, kind of explain why they're here and what sort of the reason we want to give them a platform to talk. So I'm going to go kind of alphabetical, not quite the same order. So I would like Ivory to introduce herself first.
Thank you so much, Renee, and thank you to the conference organizers and the sponsors. It's quite a pleasure and honor to be here. My name is Ivory Chambeshi, and I have the privilege of working in the Watts community as part of the Watts Rising Collaborative, which is a multi-sectoral initiative on steroids that combines 40+ organizations, a climate action focus, community development focus centered around the vision and aspiration of residents of Watts. In that capacity, I help to troubleshoot project management issues. I'm responsible for developing and implementing an anti-displacement plan. And then I also serve as a liaison to the Jordan Downs Redevelopment Initiative. So aside from that, I'm a South LA native, born, bred, and buttered, as I like to say. And I fashion myself as a social justice oriented, equity centered cultivator of sustainable communities. And of all of the descriptors and the identity markers, my favorite and the one I'm most excited about is that I'm a mama to two little people who believe I'm their employee, and I try to be a good employee. But that informs my orientation to life and to my professional work, because the aspirations and visions and opportunities that I want for my little babies, I want that for the residents that I serve in Watts and all people. And unfortunately, our built environment doesn't always convey to, in my case, little brown girls, that they have value and meaning and possibility. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm happy to help lift up the voices of Watts residents to the extent that I can. And For folks who want more of the voice of residents directly, one of our partners is having an event this evening for Earth Day with the Watts Writers Workshop, and it's in celebration of Earth Day. And that's, you can go to the YouTube page for Wattskanda, WATTSKANDA, so you can hear from residents directly. Thank you, and I'll yield the floor.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we can put that link on the chat. The next one up is Demar. If you could sort of chime in here.
My name is Demar Matthews. I'm founder and principal of Off Top Design. My design studio is pretty much focused on improving the built environment in Black and brown neighborhoods. Other than that, yeah, I'm really just interested in this issue of aesthetics in predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods, but specifically the Black aesthetic, developing a Black architectural language that speaks to and derives from Black culture purely. And yeah, my first kind of case study house of figuring this thing out is in Watts. And as Sticks just showed you, one of the renders there. But yeah, I think that's why I'm here. Hopefully.
That sounds about right. All right. With that, Marco, you there?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. And I'm a little emotional, and I blame Sticks, because I think he really put me in a different headspace. This isn't going the way I envisioned. And so I had this whole thing laid out, and he just checked me. So I'm humbled to be amongst y'all. I represent the developers, but I also think, because of my experience, I grew up in public housing, come from a home where domestic violence, gang violence, substance abuse was prevalent. I think it shaped my perspective. I served in the military, Marines. I have a doctorate from USC, but all of those things, when it comes to these types of conversations, mean different things. I approach my work with a complicated lens, and so I want to make sure, as a community development manager at Bridge Housing, I want to make sure that we're doing right by people, that we're developing with them, that we listen, that we shut up when necessary, and do the best we can to get out of the way, to make room for residents. And something that stood out from what Sticks was saying is that, it's easy to come into a community and redevelop it, and we look at residents and other community stakeholders as consumers of service, participants in programs. It's rare that we look at people or consider them as creators of value or as assets, and probably the most informed in what's happening in a community. And so I've been fortunate enough to be part of the community development team at Jordan Downs for 5 years now. I'm currently managing a collective impact initiative. The first topic area I've been managing is workforce development, and I'm proud to say that 100% of the jobs we've created, new jobs created, 100% of them have gone to people from the community. It's been a lot of work. Ivory has been a champion in this movement, and she's really been an advocate. And so I've said a lot. Sticks, I still blame you, but thank you all very much for allowing me the opportunity to talk and share.
Thank you, Marcos. And last but not least, BJ Segal is joining us as well. He has a couple of projects in Jordan Down, and he's actually been, well, I'll let you talk, BJ.
Okay. Thank you, Rene. Thank you very much. And thank you, AIALA, as well as thank you, Noma, and all the individual organizers who put in all their time. So I'm Vijay Segal with FSY Architects in Los Angeles. We are located in Frogtown, very close to downtown Los Angeles. And I've been involved in affordable housing for past 30 years. And like many of you know, affordable housing comes with a lot of challenges. It's going into a neighborhood which hasn't seen affordable housing for a while to going to a neighborhood which they have seen a lot of affordable housing projects before, and just learning from the community what they would like to see and then actually delivering it. Many of you will know that affordable housing actually comes with many, many layers of financing, sometimes 4, 5, 6 layers of financing. And each financing source has a limitation or constraints on that. And our biggest, as architects, our biggest challenges always is when we do the community outreach and we are making some commitments to the community, what we can deliver. And then when the finance, everything comes up, that sometimes comes with those constraints, limits our hands of ours and our developers. And that's always a challenge. So that's an ongoing challenge we're fighting with. And besides that, like I mentioned, we have about 8 projects under construction right now. 2 of them are in Watts in Jordan Downs, and many several projects in preliminary stages of development. And for myself personally, I'm an immigrant. I'm not a native here. I came here about 33 years ago to study at UCLA to do my master's. And then I stayed back and I'm still here. And I love, my passion is affordable housing. And right now, the biggest challenge architects are facing and developers are facing are the cost of affordable housing, which is running in the north of $500, $600, like $650,000 per unit. And that's a big challenge we are facing right now. So with that, I'll rest. I think we can talk. We can get to a discussion.
Thank you, Vijay. And I think you sort of open up my first question to the group, which is, many times we are in these events that obviously we all have aspirations of doing better. I don't think anyone who's here feels different. And you just talk about the limitations, sort of, and the aspiration come in conflict a little bit. So as design professionals, and I ask now the panel in different, obviously there are different aspects and different facets. And one of the things that I've noticed, and you probably, Vijay, can talk to this, is that one of the sort of checklist items on any public funding for a big project is actually doing community outreach. But I think, at least my perception is that there's good community outreach and there's bad community outreach. And so we figured that we're going to use Watts as an example where it might be successful. Sometimes it has not been successful. So as a design professional, and design, I'm using design, the big design. So planners, community advocates, architects, not only, not only, and the builders as well. What is the role that we can take in order to make sure that we can sort of conduct a successful community design process? And I'll open the floor to you guys, and we'll roll how it goes. Okay.
Well, I'll exercise female privilege. Change, and I think a critical role for us as designers would be to be curious and to be humble. Because it takes a lot to get to some of these positions in terms of education and getting our fancy letters behind our names and staying up late at night and, presenting in front of juries and what have you, we develop a sense of, knowledge or expertise. And if I may be a little provocative, one of the sponsors, their tagline is building value through expertise. And we appreciate the sponsorship in that expertise. But when we enter communities, we are guests, and we need to operate under the assumption that the communities are experts of their own lives and their own realities and of their own aspirations. And we need to constantly ask questions, ask to be invited, ask to return, ask to have a seat at the table of facilitation of a given design, effort. And then something else that I think is very critical is that we need to shift away from a transactional community engagement orientation where, you know, we have to do X number of meetings, cross off the box, make sure everybody signed a sign-in sheet so we can say we had 300 people who attended a series of meetings over a given amount of time, and boom, we're ready to file this entitlement or, you know, make it happen. But we need to be better about really trying to foster authentic relationships, and those happen over time. Those don't happen based on a project by project situation. That happens from, you know, something that I think is a master at community engagement, something that this gentleman does, Leandro Tyberg with Prime Store. We work together as part of Watts initiatives. But when I'm in my own community in the Crenshaw district, you know, on the downtown Crenshaw meetings and this neighborhood council meeting, that neighborhood council meeting, Leandro is there. He's in South, you know, in the Crenshaw district. I saw him at a Trust South LA event, you know, so he has a curiosity and a desire and a conviction and a commitment. Hearing the I don't want to say the needs, because we so often focus on the needs and it's a deficit perspective that that Marco, I think, said so eloquently. But we need to recognize community members as inherently rich with boundless assets, and that we are trying to facilitate the realization of aspirations and dreams and hopes. And doing that doesn't happen through, you know, your a regular engagement partner, a regular student, and really humbling yourself and sitting back and listening, and listening to the spirit of a community member's concern or aspiration, and not how they might emote. Because sometimes when colorful language is used, you can kind of react and get defensive. But if you listen to the spirit, you hear the hurt, the harm, the trauma, and really the aspiration that a community is trying to achieve.
If I may, thank you, Ivory. I also think it has to deal with the way we think as we approach these types of activities. There's an inherent power imbalance, usually, especially in communities like Watts. And we, with our titles and our suits, we enter a space and we pretend to engage people. You know, there's probably a lot more tokenism that happens than anything else. And most of the engagements between us girls, I'll say, are more therapeutic. We go through the motions, we ask people what they think, and then we don't come back. We're done. And I think to Ivory's point about Leandro, and he's one of my man crushes, he shows up, and he shows up, and the difference there is that it's one thing to want to be efficient, but it's another thing to be effective and true and create this meaningful dynamic between people. Residents are context experts. They know what's happening in a community. We are content experts. We know design, we know things, we know different things. Together, I think when we address this power imbalance, I think is when we start to see something beautiful happens. And it's rare, but I think that's the challenge and the opportunity.
I guess to add on or to dovetail, I think a major issue in these communities are the community does not trust the developer, right? And then the architect is a bit of, you kind of attached to the developer, or, you know, and it's just this line of people who they do not trust. And a big part of that is the projects come to these communities complete almost and say, what do you think about it? We can switch out a percentage to make it fit you a little more specifically, or, you know, you go and try to buy off stakeholders essentially for their support and hope that that suffices, when, you know, to be a partner in design is coming together at the beginning. is, as concepts are being created, that the community is at that table from the start purely, and I think that is even something that I am struggling with, or have struggled with, and I'm trying to get better at with, even this idea of Black aesthetics. You can't put a house, I can't try to get my own shit off. It's really not about me ever, unless I'm just paying for the project and it's my own thing. Otherwise, the community has to be the leader, and we really have to sit in the passenger seat, kind of just help. But I don't think that a lot of us in architecture, development, real estate, et cetera, really take that approach purely.
Like Ivory mentioned, that a lot of times these projects or this outreach becomes a little transactional, and that happens many times, and that needs to stop. But on the other hand, the reality on the ground is when architects are hired, sometimes developer is already bought the land, or they're in land control, and their pro forma works with certain amount of density or so much. So in so many ways, the project pro forma start dictating what, as architects, we can massage it, we can play with it, but we get those limitations as architects. And so it cannot reach, this outreach cannot be really on a project base, because this gets very difficult, because project base is the dollar amount comes in first. The budget and all start dictating that, because that's pro forma, your budget is pro forma, and that's what dictates. So in a way, we did a project in Leimert Park years ago. Actually, we are still working on it on Vision Theater. And just before we started working on Vision Theater in 2005, there was an outreach done for the Leimert Park wide, like what you want to see in Leimert Park. So I think that's kind of outreach needs to happen, and it not happen on just a project based, and which is also always gets with time limitations. Where 90 days or some things to close the escrow, all those things start playing into it. So in reality, that's all with all the good intentions from architect, from the developer, things falls out where outreach becomes more transactional. And as a role, as a designers, I see our role as a facilitator, as an impartial participant who just listens to the community, analyze everything, their wishes and what they would like to see, because they know their community best. We don't. They do, and then synthesize all their ideas into a workable solution, to a workable three-dimensional building solution. So yeah, I mean, there are challenges.
Thank you very much. And I think that goes perfectly into my next question, is as we're trying to, and that's the thing, the position of the designer is a little limited. And obviously the developer has all these sort of other sort of concerns. So we as designers can sort of help do some due diligence as well, to make sure that we identify some aspects. Because yeah, we should be looking at context, and environmental design is a critical aspect of what we do. It's not only about nature and the planet, it really is about social and political aspects. So within that, when we're coming and the architect comes in pretty late into the project, the developer's been talking to the city, to the policy people, to who they identified as the stakeholders, as a sort of people that need to be on this thing. So I ask you, how can we provide support in identifying who are the stakeholders in the community, and who should be at the table? So when we set up that table, we make sure, because we have limited contact, the perfect scenario, we'll have 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, we'll have a year. But by the time that we get a phone call, we might have 2 or 3 meetings to participate. Is there a way that we could identify and figure out how to make sure that at the table, there's the right people getting a seat at the table? So then when we get to design the project in the very expedited schedule that we're gonna get, DJ knows about that. How can we provide that support to identify the appropriate stakeholders to be at the table in order to make sure that the process is representative of a community? Or can we? I don't know.
think that's tough because, you know, every community has their own politics around, you know, things that one stakeholder will say yes to and be in complete agreement to, and other stakeholders will be, you know, complete opposites. And how do you serve both masters in a sense, you know? And then there's kind of this history of in the community that is before you, you know, when you're trying to get a stakeholder, they may have their own sort of, I guess, baggage. So that's really tough to figure out how to identify and how to know how much weight to put into each stakeholder. So I'm more so interested to find out the ideas of everyone else here. I do know the answer to that question.
When you figure it out, publish something and I'll follow it.
Right.
And I'll
We
cite
will
it.
publish something out of this, guys. So come up with ideas. It's a chance.
When I was reflected on some of the questions, Renee and team, I said, pray. Pray and hold your breath. Because Demar, you know, really aptly named that it's very difficult because in the Watts context, and you know, it might be a universal truth, you have the folks who are the most vocal, who are the most active. You know, if there are 10 meetings in the community in a given week, they will be at every meeting, every single meeting, which you have to respect and admire that they have that dedication. But then you also have the people who, you know, may never go to a community meeting, who's just trying to get their groceries and get home to make dinner, you know. But I think it goes back to that curiosity question and listening. Like, I was in a Watts Neighborhood Council meeting about a week ago, and one of the attendees asked a question to an LAPD officer about someone who had passed in a homicide, and you know, the police officer was closed-lipped about the victim's name, and later in the meeting she was like, "It's okay, officer. I got the information from the streets." So the streets is talking, and you need to listen. And I think one of the ways that you do that is, you know, like in the scholarly context, there's like a literature review. What is the existing creative output or media output or meeting output that predates your time in this given community? And you know, there are meetings that you can check for, but there's also you know, social media can be helpful if you're looking for certain community groups. Like one of the go-to ones for Watts is, you know, you're from Watts when, and you know, certain prominent leaders kind of, well, leader can be relative, post different things that are going on in the community. So I think that's one of the ways to identify stakeholders. But I think the identification can sometimes be easily done, but it's the sensitivity to the nuances and who those stakeholders are. So I'll pivot to Marco, who has a reflection on that with a meeting that he attended once. I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. You know, when I first started at Bridge, like I was familiar with Watts, never lived there, dated someone in Watts in the 90s. And for the first year, I just kept getting my butt kicked in meetings, in community meetings, because I represented the developer. And I got so caught up in the developer hat. It was, you know, I was committed to you know, following my work plan, you know, the organization's work plan. And it wasn't until I stopped and listened and got out of my office and got to know people. And, you know, I'm glad Sticks was here and kicked us off, because I imagine that there are more Sticks in communities, more people who have a network, an informal network, a powerful network, and connected. Like I think of my mom, like my mom is a walking 211. She has a 4th grade education, but she could tell you where to go if you need something. She doesn't attend meetings, but she knows what's happening. Ivory's right, the streets talk, and they know more than we do. And so I think part of this is getting out of our comfort zones, going into communities, leaving our ties, and you know, just being ourselves in these spaces where people are approachable. I quickly learned, and I had to change the way I carry a journal with me wherever I go. And people would tell me they thought I was Children's Services, they thought I was LAPD, they thought I was HACLA, they thought I was everybody. So they wouldn't talk to me. And it wasn't until I showed up to meetings, I got to know people. I didn't depend on the squeaky wheels all the time. Like that's the easy, not fully representative way to go. But I got to know people who know other people. And so it sort of just snowballed from there. And then it eventually I started attending meetings and people were welcoming me. It took about a year and a half, but it was really about getting to know people and creating this partnership where it wasn't that because of my education or where I worked, that I knew more, but if anything, I was there with community. I showed them that I truly cared about what's happening in this community. And although I went home at 4:30, 5 o'clock, I recognize that they're the ones experiencing the shootings. They experienced, the loud parties, and so I thought it was a lesson I needed to learn that way. I needed people to put me in my place, and as an institution, it's hard because our ego gets in the way. Like we're one of the largest developers on the West Coast, and so here I am in Washington. Like, tell me what to do, people. Like I'm here for you, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah. I want to just add something because Marco and I have the benefit of, our job sites being in Watts. So we, have the opportunity to get beat up in meetings and get cursed out, and then continue to go to the community and foster those relationships. But for shorter, amounts of time, like the scenario that VJ explained, you have to be strategic and you have to use what's available to you. So to be more specific about what I mentioned earlier, some communities nowadays, because there is kind of a shift to trying to be more community minded and to help for communities to shape development processes. Communities go through different visioning exercises. There are, for lack of a better word, like primary sources in the form of documentation or, that you might be able to find. So someone put it in the chat, and I think it's a great question about like how to lift up social equity in the design of community plans. And something that I'm kind of connecting to with this comment is Watts has a number of these different visioning documents. Like I mentioned earlier, I live in the Crenshaw district, and Leimert Park has visioning documents. Organization Hope has visioning documents. So if you can't hit every meeting or you can't penetrate the gatekeepers or the like Marco said, the squeaky wheels, try to do a survey of different sources that can help you get more insight into the pulse of a community. And then I would also say, to the extent possible, and I'm not an architect or designer to know your process, but go to a local park, go just sit, like take your folding chair, be inconspicuous, so don't take your notepad like Marco, but but get absorbed, go to the restaurant that might be the in this case Watts Coffee House is a local watering hole, and do your best to listen, to feel, to observe, and then allow those squeaky wheels or commentary you might hear at meetings to help you color in the broader sketch that you might have had. So a challenge with like the conflict between adopted policy and community visioning documents is represented in the community plan process, that what makes it into the final document isn't necessarily always consistent with other plans that the community might have created that don't have the same legal standing. So you have situations where projects are approved that conform to the Southeast LA community plan, but completely override the Watts Our Town plan that was created over a couple years, you know, that has a vision for green space, for cultural tourism, and it's been superseded to you know, a five-story development that is a great development, is for the need of affordable housing, but it's like in direct conflict with, you know, this initiative that developed over many, many years. And I would venture to say that maybe if there was a little more foresight, you know, digging a little deeper, doing a little more research on the part of the developer and then architect, maybe that project would have been massaged to be designed differently to better cohere with the community's vision for what that space could be. Uh-oh, Christopher Locke said architects and designers need to decolonize their design process away from Eurocentric ideals. I got to give a little snap on that.
Yeah.
I agree there.
DJ?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the way we identify the stakeholders typically when we get a project is just to go to the neighborhood council, councilman, and the council office typically give you who the stakeholders are, and that's to the developers. And so, or within the 500 radius, the planning has that where we have to mail them to notify them. So that identifies some of the stakeholders. Besides that, we reach out to some churches sometimes. But again, I wish there was whether it's citywide through council office or through planning, there could be a list or database of all the stakeholders in that places. Because when I go to a project, when I did project in Jordantown, I totally, as an architect, I don't know how many visioning documents in that neighborhood has been done. There's no centralized system to identify that. So if I happen to talk to somebody during meeting, which says, oh, there's a visioning document done 10 years ago and it's on the shelf somewhere, nobody has taken it off the shelf, then I can definitely go, and as an architect, I would love to do that, because I think that's very important to us, that what the visioning was done by the neighborhood, what the neighborhood really wanted to see. And maybe we can, because as architects, our job is to facilitate the community needs and desires into a real functioning building solution. So we could do that as long as we know those documents exist. But sadly, sometimes we don't even know, as architects, I'm talking about this as architects, that they exist. So, and could developer know? Sometimes when a developer comes in such a short time period, maybe they don't know. So there could be a database of someplace at a city level, and that'd be great.
And I think, sorry, Vijay.
No, I was going to say also the second thing is to identify the stakeholders. I've seen that some of the meetings we do only in the evenings, and some people just cannot attend because they have family members to attend, dinner to make. But I've seen sometimes we have done when we do on a weekends, on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, their attendance is different, and also the way their participation is very different. They're a little more relaxed. On a weekday, it's a 6 to 7 meeting. Everybody's just rushing, and the people typically in the evening meetings are an hour and a half reach out. Typically, people who are likes to talk, like to their promoters, basically that promoter personality. You know, we have the 4 types of personalities: promoters, analyzers, controllers, and supporters. Technically, personalities which are promoters, that 90 minutes they're going to talk because they like to talk. There's a lot of spotlight on them. But there are supporters, or there are analyzers who just sit there back and they don't like to put the spotlight on them. They're never going to talk. But I've seen on weekends when it's more relaxed, like I was saying, like go to a coffee shop. But in this is more relaxed meeting. You can go individually, start talking to them. the participation is much better, and we can get much more better information from them when they are not, people are not put on spot, but you're doing more one-to-one talking to them.
I think
I'd even add, and something that we're considering with how we do engagement with Watts Rising Collaborative is not expect people to come to a meeting. You know, go to the soccer field, go to the basketball court, post up in front of the grocery store. You know, we have these modes of doing that is standard practice, but may not be the best practice. You know, people get intimidated when they walk in a room and they see chairs lined up, you know, and are expected to write a card with their name or, you know, or something like that. We need to just really turn the whole process upside down to get to better outcomes and more culturally competent ways of engaging people.
And that, Ivory and BJ, you just hit kind of another of the questions that we had, and it's super important because I don't necessarily think that's by accident, and that's an important thing. Sort of, if you have a meeting on a Tuesday afternoon at 7 o'clock, you're limiting the people who can be at that meeting. And if you have a meeting where you have a speaker and a microphone, you're limiting the people who feel comfortable speaking to a microphone, standing up in a room of 50 people, and you know, and then you have some people who are very actively love that microphone in their hands. You know, let's call them the squeaky wheel that Marco talked about. And I think that's a critical aspect. And you guys started talking about it. And I don't know if there are other suggestions you guys might have in reference to how to demystify the process, how to have a correct engagement. If there are any tools you can share with us here that we as designers then can share. You know, because the idea of this conversation is not to, just so everyone knows, ask your questions on the side, but it's not to finish today, right? Because we won't have time to figure it out. There's been, you know, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, people have been trying to figure this out. So we just want to start a conversation. So if there are any options, any things you've seen, excuse me, in your talks, in your experiences, how we can really make an accessible community outreach. You mentioned social media, which I think is a great tool that we didn't have 30 years ago. You know, Facebook postings and such things, which is a great outreach. Knocking on doors can be scary when you don't know a neighborhood. Sitting in the coffee shop is a great option. Having meetings on Saturdays. Are there other things you can share with the group in things you've seen that work in reference to outreach? Things you've seen and experienced that empower and allow people who might otherwise not be that comfortable with a microphone to voice their opinions?
You know, I would say, I think it starts first by shifting our thinking. Each of these developments or activities, you know, should always, we should think about them as a custom job. Not every, you know, you can't, not, you know, something that may have worked on another project isn't necessarily going to work on what you might be working on now. And you know, when I used to work at Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation in Ventura, and one thing I learned about, you know, this community in Oxnard is people didn't want to attend formal meeting spaces, but they were comfortable opening up their homes. So we would host meetings in people's homes. We would bring bread and coffee and we would hang out. And, you know, I love the idea of meeting in people's homes. Probably the most, and bread. Oh yeah. I think, you know, if we don't shift our thinking and meet people where they're at, I think we're going to keep having these conversations, and this panel could happen, you know, every month, and we'll still be in the same spot. This reminds me of a quote: you know, managers would rather live with a problem they can't solve than with a solution they can't fully understand or control. And I think that it's easy to keep doing what we've done because it's easy, but coming out and meeting people where they're at is a lot more difficult. It does require that we step out of our comfort zones. You know, meeting people where they're at, again, in Ventura meant meeting people with some people in their homes. At Jordan, it means running into people as I'm walking through the development. You know, they don't always like going to the gym to meet. You know, they're intimidated being in the spaces where the housing authority, the property managers are in these same spaces. And so we just have to get out of our own spaces and figure out where people are and meet them there.
Yeah, I echo that. And I think there have been I've been trying to find out the project I'm working on with Sticks and Miss Jenny Watkins. Even though it's a ADU, it's more of a residential project that doesn't require public outreach. We're trying to enforce community, or we're trying to have community resources. So I think that it is mandatory then. And so the ways, I guess, creative ways we've been going about meetings is like, we'll have like these signs right here. Sorry, I know my screen will blur it out, but it's not like there's these posters that are on sticks and bricks, that stand up by themselves, but it's pure artwork of the images that I created for the Black aesthetic, and so they'll have QR codes on one side, and then on the other side they'll have like flyers and to explain what the event is, what this community meeting is about, and we put them like in front of grocery stores, in front of, you might hop down to Nickerson's and just start dropping them off. Or we're going to just drop these at like these public interventions, in the middle of these public spaces to cause an intervention where you now have to interact with this art. And it's like, what's this art on my block doing just sitting here? You can knock it down, you could throw it, it's gonna come back because I'm gonna put it back. When we have a new one, the imagery, it's a new image. And then, you wonder, why did this image change? Why is, because it's gonna kind of stick to your head. And if you go to the meetings or not, when you come to the towers, because everybody is gonna come to the towers at some point and watch, then you'll see what these images have been saying, and it's not unfamiliar to you. And we're just kind of trying to look at I'm just trying to look at these different routes of, and of course, this is also walking down blocks and Watts by myself, just handing flyers out, and it allows for intimate conversation. I've been outside of liquor stores at like 9:30, where I had just a huge, like a half-hour conversation with 3 or 4 people and got to fully talk about ideas where we were both comfortable. I'm naturally gonna be comfortable in that neighborhood, and people see and feel that, and I feel like it impacts the people who I'm talking to a little different than getting the RFI and saying you got 2 weeks to respond. But next one, I'll end there.
I love all of that, Demar.
So Renee, 2 things come to my mind. When we had, actually a couple of years ago, we had our first outreach meeting on Jordan Downs. And it was interesting, like about half an hour later during these discussions, we just realized that within our office, we have English speaking, my business partner is Spanish speaking. And we are a Spanish speaking team, and we have English speaking. I don't speak Spanish or understand Spanish. But within like half an hour of this meeting, we realized that the meeting has turned into two separate groups. One is English speaking and one is Spanish speaking. And the meeting, we did the whole thing. We came back with the information, but the 2 groups didn't know what the other group was talking about, kind of. Mm-hmm. So in the second meeting, credit to our developer, the Michael's organization, they came up with this whole kind of booklet. There were like 7-8 pages of questionnaire in English and Spanish. And this was with multiple answers. So nobody really has to go think that what they want to put on the paper, but there were different questions about what they want to see in our project. So it was a multiple choice. And once we collected that all, so it was more like I would say it was more equal participation. There's an equity with that participation, because everybody was answering the same question, and they had those 5 or 6 good choices to make. So that way we were able to analyze the data very easily and understand where everybody, different groups, different level of personalities, what everybody wanted. So they were able to put their thoughts in there because they didn't have to stand up and talk. So I think that's old school, but that really worked. And the second one we did about 3 years ago for one of our clients, a community of friends that's for developers. And in one community, we did that where we took a food truck for lunch on Saturday from 10 to 3. And we had 2 or 3 picnic tables and told neighbors to come have lunch with us. And we sat there for 4 or 5 hours, but we were talking one-to-one at that time. So, and there people were coming there focused because that was our project site. The food truck was on the project site. So people could come and we had papers and all, they can sketch things, or they can tell them, I want to see on that corner, I would like to see that. On that corner, we can see that. We were looking at a coffee shop. A lot of people we want Japanese restaurant. There's a very Latino neighborhood, but we don't have any Japanese at all in town. So that kind of one-to-one, getting that one-on-one information was really, really like heartwarming to know that, okay, we really talk to people. It's not just those people who just like to talk, and every meeting we go to, certain neighborhoods, there are some people, that we're going to go to project that we're going to do outreach in that neighborhood. Those are 3 people going to talk most of the time. They're going to take 60% or 80% of the time on talking time. So this was really, really good. We felt really good. Like, okay, now we have some good information, what neighborhood really would like to see here.
So if I may, what I heard is multimedia strategies. There is no one size fits all, just like Marco said, customized and very much not your typical public meeting. Like that should become like a curse word, like public meeting, like it's a trigger word. We need to do more dynamic, more community sensitive methods, and something that we're rolling out with Watts Rising is us not even doing the outreach or not even doing the engagement, but identifying recognized leaders, but not your, vanguard leaders who are the folks who are in every meeting. And you do need to listen to those people. And I gave a talk about a week ago, and I said, you need to find a Miss Linda, my, lightning rod and Watts, who keeps me honest and, pulls no punches and sometimes has no chill, is an activist by the name of Miss Linda Cleveland. She's fierce in meetings, but one-on-one, when it's not meeting time, she talks about how much she loves the meatballs that are served at the Watts Senior Center. So she's very kind, but her role in those meetings are to hold everyone's feet to the fire, especially people in my and Marco's seat. But aside from the Miss Lindas, you also need to find what I say is like our proxy for, the resident that's just trying to go to work and raise their kids. I say Juanita Q. And Juanita, because I know Black Juanitas and I know Latina Juanitas. You need to try to identify those folks and engage those folks. And like I was saying in the beginning, don't even do it. So we're toying with this model called the street team, where we've identified through an application process and referral process, people in the community who are recognized as people in the know, as influencers, if you will, grassroots influencers. And we are, we've recruited them and are compensating them to be the feedback loop, the engagers, the facilitators, to help ensure that Watts residents are not only benefiting from the 24 climate infrastructure projects we're implementing, but that they can weigh in, they can critique, they can guide, they can hold us accountable. So when possible, move, get out the way when you're doing engagement, and let the folks talk to their neighbors and friends. And they've been so instrumental with, one example is we have the Walk Bike Watts project, where we're installing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. And we made the mistake of, trying to, due to budget limitations, refining a scope of work where we were eliminated a bus pad in this one area. But one of our street team members, Angelica Uquirdes, was like, no, this is a heavily trafficked area. There's not a place for people to comfortably stand and wait for the dash bus. And this is not one of the improvements that you should take off the list. So, they, like we said before, they have such a, and we all in different ways have an expertise about how they live and move in the community, and they are the best messengers and the best solicitors of, you know, that added feedback that can help shape a project. So find your Miss Linda and find your Angelica or your Juanita Q.
Sometimes they're the best land use planners because they know the spaces.
Right,
That's Miss Linda. She has an encyclopedic knowledge of the Watts community.
And sadly, we're getting kind of tight on time. And as I said, we're not going to fix it, guys. I have one very important question to the team, and I know there's a bunch of questions, guys. Put the questions in the HOVA app, and we'll hopefully have a couple of minutes to answer questions. Whatever question doesn't get answered, I'll make a commitment to reach out to the team and make sure you guys get an answer. Because this is an important conversation to have. It puts us in our place as designers, and what we could do more than just providing a service. It's easy to come up with excuses to why. I think Marco just said it, right? It's easy. We don't do this because it's easy. It's hard to do it right. So that's what this is important. One question I want to make sure that we touch on, because it was interesting in two different experiences that Demar and Marco just explained. Marco said when he started walking on Watts, he got his ass handed to him. And Demar said he was comfortable in a liquor store talking to people. And I think it's important as we're doing this in kind of one item that I make sure we don't sort of go without touching is how, and Watts is a great example, but this actually is sort of a case study for everywhere else in LA where you have different dynamics, different histories. You have people who've been in Watts for the last 50, 100 years as a family, and you have people who are moving in the third, fourth immigration that's coming in. You have a Latinx community, you have an African-American community, you have a Black community, because there's a difference with the people who, you know, define themselves as being from Watts. And that's a very different thing. Is there any tools, anything you can share, maybe about experiences of how we can help sort of traverse the conflicting narratives, or maybe not conflicting actually. I think part of the problem is that we've developed them as conflicting narratives, but they're actually narratives of people who have been disenfranchised consistently. How can we, or is there a way we can do it? And I think the kitchen table is a great, sort of Marco mentioned, but the challenges within identifying kind of how we can talk about the different narratives. And not only that, we can talk about the Latinx African-American narrative as well, which is one that, you know, cannot get lost in the shuffle. So if you guys have some parting thoughts on this for this chapter of this discussion, because I would love to continue this conversation at a later time. It's open, guys.
Are you about
Don't be shy.
Okay. All right. I won't be shy. I can't even fake like I'm shy. This is the challenge of the day. You know, this is the challenge of design, of community development, of community engagement, of this project of humanity, is reconciling culture, history, complexity, and holding it in a way where you do the least harm that you possibly can. In Watts and in many communities, there's been these patterns of migration, land tenure, and different relationships to a place. And Watts is an interesting context because there's the situation of African-American, primarily elders, who are trying to uphold, that we've been here, we've been in the trenches, we've created art out of nothing, we survived all of the exploitation and divestment and over-policing and redlining that you threw at us. And now that it's a new Watts or a new day, development and investment is kind of poised to override all of that, history. And adding to the mix that you also have a housing crisis with underpinnings of white supremacy and racism that has influenced the homelessness crisis. So you have this competing priority of policymakers to put up housing wherever, whenever, And in some respects, that's it feels like it's superseding the preservation of these sacred sites. So, and then you have a Latinx community that has tenure as well, but maybe a different, length. And then of course, our First Nations people who, constantly battle against erasure and being made to be invisible and things like that. So I was thinking about, like, in creating an aesthetic or cohering these tensions, like, what is the best method? I don't know the answer, but I think if we take the view of, I just recently started saying a reparative lens, I don't know when Nancy Pelosi and them is gonna pass the reparations bill. They had their kente cloth stoles and they were cute, but we don't know. But as individual practitioners who I think want to undo some of this muck and mire, we have to think reparatively and in a conciliatory way. And maybe a possible strategy is thinking about some of the themes that connect us all. So when I think about like my relationship to the whole like Black and Brown conflict, how I've settled it in my spirit and like prioritize humanity is we all have a desire to learn and grow and raise our kids and search for a better opportunity. My grandparents did that, fleeing the Jim Crow South, Louisiana. And our history is a story of migration, the way many Latinx communities, their story is one of migration. So how can we lift up migration as a unifying narrative that influences aesthetics? How can we lift up family? How can we lift up art and culture and the coherence of art and culture? I feel like Boogaloo or Latin jazz is such a, and salsa is such a powerful representation of what happens when cultures converge and create this beautiful thing. So in our engagement, we can't default to listening to, certain people and certain demographics. We have to reconcile and cohere, and it's not easy, but I think that's the challenge of today. Like the country, the world is having a conversation about how to reconcile diverging histories, conflicting histories when we think about monuments. Do we toss? I heard something on NPR, I don't even remember the guy's name, but he was like a slaveholder at one point and fought for the Confederate Army. But then later in his life, he then became like, helping the Reconstruction and trying to empower Black elected officials, things like that. So like, how do we reconcile that? Like, what does the monument or lack thereof look like for him? What does the tourist destination or the cultural sacred site in Watts look like, holding these three histories and cultures at the same time? And I know, Demar, you had some thoughts about that, but it's a complexity that is the question of the day, especially when we're beating the drum to lift up Black, Indigenous, people of color, histories that have been overlooked and still continue to be.
Yeah. And let me know if this is a little better than the last time. I know this little thing can rub against my shirt, but really, I think of cultural aesthetics and aesthetics that derive from a culture as so important, especially in Watts when you're dealing with a rapid displacement that's happening to the African-American population. Over the last 30 years, the Black population went from about 85 down to like 24. And then I saw another report a month ago that was saying it's now closer to 18. And so I'm just, it's scary because you wonder, what can you do to preserve this culture's history here in Watts, and Stick spoke of how redlining impacted the area, of course, and we all know about redlining and that you had certain areas that Black people could live in. And now it's like, we know we gave you that, we need that back. Y'all go a little further out, and so now people are being displaced out towards, Inland Empire, Palmdale, Lancaster, etc. And I think that having aesthetics that speak to culture in the built environment that can really represent people or a people and really allow something for people to be able to always come back to see and to identify with and to, you know, even in Watts in terms of landmarks, how many things do people go to Watts to see? You know, do they go to Watts to see the towers? Some people are going to go to see Mafundi. A lot of people though, and I've witnessed this, come into the towers, take their pictures, dip back, they out of Watts. You know, and it's like 5 minutes, and you think of, man, you have this historically Black city who somehow doesn't have that many known Black landmarks. There are landmarks. A lot of them aren't known to most people. But how do you celebrate the landmarks that are established, and how do you create more where multiple cultures can identify with it and can feel, you know, pride through the built environment instead of the common factors that stick out to us now when we go into Watts. I think that's of the utmost importance. And I think if the way that the numbers are looking now, you know, 30 to 50 years, that Black population going to be at 2%, you know, and what happens? I think that you can stall it. And these are one of the things that you do to stall and hope that people have reasons to come back to Watts when you get your degree, because it says it's 2% right now, that only 2% of residents in Watts have a degree. I know that it's people are leaving and not coming back with those degrees. Come back, have a reason to come back, have amenities for these people to enjoy when they come back, you know. And so yes, I just definitely am for these cultural aesthetics and these different methods of allowing different people to finally identify with their built environment, how a lot of other people have been able to for the last 400 plus years.
Something I'll add, thank you, Demar and Ivory, is that because this is difficult work, I think, you know, we need each other. Like, we need residents, we need you all, you know, we need developers, and, you know, we shouldn't approach this work thinking, you know, we have to have all the answers or that we're alone. I think if we align ourselves, you know, Ivory talked about the human part of this work. You know, the people I've gotten to know, I respect them because they remind me, you know, they remind me of my mom. They remind me of a kid growing up in public housing, and I depend on them to keep me honest, to teach me. You know, I think I learn more from them as I do from other people in my industry. And so I think, you know, adopting this reflective type practice where we keep ourselves humbled, we approach a community thinking that, you know, people don't need us to empower them. We need to create the spaces where people can empower themselves to make these changes. Yes, we need to move and get out the way, like Ivory said, but we also have to stop talking. You did say that. We also have to, again, stop talking and listen for the most part.
I would say, like, as humans, I think we always have different ideas, not talking about different cultures within my family. Last night we were talking about going out for dinner. We can't even decide. Everybody wants a different thing. So, but at the end, we did go out, we did have dinner. So I think as humans, we will come together. Our ideas will converge. So like in Watts, divergent cultures, my hope is they will converge into a new culture. So we'll create a new history because times are different. Things constantly change, and you cannot fight change, but it's work with the change rather than fighting the change. So why we could hope, like, we are creating a new culture out of this because we are a melting pot. Even the Latina culture, within the Black culture, people come from different countries. There's only one culture. People from Mexico are very different than from deeper South America. So, but they all we pool them into one Latino culture, but they are not. So in so many ways, I think let's hope that it's converged into we just move into we are creating a new culture, we're creating a new history now from onwards. But again, this topic is a complicated topic. I think several discussions are needed. Many more participants, many more point of views are needed on this one. And as human, we always find solution. I think we'll be there.
Yes, more conversation and bread, Marco.
Food,
bread.
yes.
Morning.
And my last comment, you know, and it really just echoes what VJ just said. On the site that we're working on in Watts, there's these pomegranate trees, right? And the neighbor is a lady from Mexico, and she came over, maybe it might have been a month ago or so. As soon as, or I guess it was a couple months because pomegranates were still growing. So we opened the gate and she comes in, her and her son, and she's like, can I grab some of those pomegranates? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And she said, I use them as my medicine for the cancer. And I was like, oh, you know, I'll bring you like a bag of these when I come through. You know, like every time I come, I'll just put some on your porch. And it's the direct neighbor, you know, Miss Janine already knows her and et cetera. But maybe 5 minutes after I gave her the bag, she came back and gave me these 2 big cups of pozole, right? And some tortillas on the side. And you know, I just thought it was so beautiful to have these cultures really being pure neighbors, you know, and if I'm able to give you this of my culture or my yard, whatever that is, you know, then it's like these shared values and turns into, I mean, I think that can turn into anything. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that I think that Watts has this real magic about it and this real beauty about it that's to be uncovered by people who don't know yet. But yeah, and again, I just thank you guys for having me. I know we're running late, but it was great to speak with you guys.
Well, on that note, I'm going to let Demar have the parting. Well, I'll have the parting words, but Demar was the last one of the panel. I want to thank you. I'm very grateful and blessed to have been just here to let you guys talk and start this conversation this year, because the conversation that's been happening, it got lost in the weeds, and it's a very important conversation for our profession. How can we do better? Our job is really to traverse those places of sort of conflict and traverse those places of dialogue. So I want to thank you guys really for sharing your thoughts. We run a little bit over time, but it was very, as I said to somebody told me, oh, we're starting late. Like, okay, it's okay, because Sticks' sort of talk was very important and intro to what we were talking and why we're talking about Watts, and why Watts was a great case study for what we're having this conversation. But this same thing is happening in Boyle Heights, in Highland Park, it's happening in East LA, it's happening everywhere in LA. So, you know, it's important to get the stakeholders. We'll answer those questions in Hova. I'll reach out to all the speakers to make sure that we can answer your questions. I want to thank you guys for sticking with us a little bit over the time. And thank you, everyone. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Renee, and thank you to all of the panelists and people who attended and really got into this conversation in the chat as well as on Wova app. So without further ado, so we can keep things rolling, we'll kick it off into our next panel. So Carmen, thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is enjoying the conference so far. So we'll jump into our second panel of the day. But before I get started, I will say happy birthday, Joshua.
Thank you.
So our second panel is a deep dive into the SoCal NOMA DEI challenge, where it's been in the past year and where it is going in the future. We have with us Lance Collins, who is the current SoCal NOMA president. He will walk us through the findings of the first year of the challenge. And then we will talk to 3 practitioners with different backgrounds. Mitra from CGF, all of our speakers will present themselves afterwards. I will just give out names. So Mitra is representing CGF, a large national firm. We have Parini, who's representing Co-Architects, a local firm. And then also Aaron Green, a professor who is involved in the challenge from the educational side. So with that, we will kick it off over to Lance, who will walk us through his presentation on where we are today with the SoCal-NOMA DEI Challenge.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you to all the previous speakers on the panel. That was an excellent presentation. And thank you to Sticks as well, too. That was just a really inspirational way to start the morning. So we're happy to follow all of that and share with you guys a lot of information that we've learned over the past 11 months or so about our DEI challenge. I'm going to share my screen here and then we can kind of jump in. There we go. Hopefully, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. So in July, August of 2020, our SoCal-NOMA chapter launched this initiative called the DEI Challenge, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And it was really in response to all of the social unrest around police brutality, inequities, lack of justice across the country that was going on last year. And we came up with this idea to provide what we hope will be a tool to the AEC industry to really make measurable changes that can affect us locally on the ground here in our architecture industry. And obviously there's a lot of challenges that need to be addressed sort of nationwide and many other areas outside of architecture, but we want to sort of focus on what we know first and know best. And so we're going to present to you some of our findings from this past year and some of the things we're doing in 2021 and beyond. The other thing I wanted to just sort of add to the preference that I was thinking about, this has obviously been an interesting week with the recent verdict on the murder of George Floyd. And, it's been essentially 11 months since his death and all of the unrest that occurred over the last summer. And, we hit, I think, an interesting milestone this week with the guilty verdicts that were delivered. And I've been kind of struggling with how to react to that all week long. I think I want to just throw out a statistic to everybody as a reminder for the importance of what we're doing. So I was looking at something in Newsweek the other day. I think it came out yesterday, the day before, but they had a stat that said, in the 11 months since May 25th last year when George Floyd was murdered, there have been 181 police killings of Black people in America since then. So while we might look at a guilty verdict as an important thing to celebrate, I want to use that also as a reminder that we are still at the starting line for everything that we are trying to do, and that is now is not the time to let up on our energy and pushing all the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice forward. We are not at a point where we think we can say we've accomplished anything, but rather we are just starting to make progress. So what I'll hopefully share with you guys today would be some of the progress that we've learned and obviously a lot more work to do collectively by all of us here going forward. So as I mentioned, the DEI challenge we launched last year. It is for all AEC firms to participate in. It's a voluntary reporting process to measure the diversity, equity, inclusion in a holistic, firm-wide, data-driven manner. I will also just add a little footnote to say we do have a DEI challenge for colleges and universities as well too that is running in parallel to this, where we're looking at changes that will impact students and faculty as well. But today we're going to focus sort of specifically on, the metrics from the AEC industry. We really took the idea from a couple points of inspiration. Number one, there are a number of firms already in the industry that are doing, a great deal of effort towards promoting these issues. I got to always start by giving credit to Perkins and Will and Gabrielle Bullock in particular, who really sparked a lot of early conversations with things that they've been working on for a number of years. We took inspiration from the Architecture 2030 Challenge about providing a transparent platform for tracking firm performance, different sources of inspiration that exist out there. The challenge that we've created consists of 2 prerequisites, mandatory items that all firms must do, and then 10 different action items for firms to select from that can target, a potential of 100 points to measure their sort of annual progress. Now, while it is a challenge and it is, a collective effort by a lot of different firms, really the purpose of the challenge is creating an annual benchmark and score to monitor progress year over year and trend that individual performance. And so what we're really looking at is sort of long-term change, long-term trends, and lessons learned that we can establish from this initiative. Here's a snapshot of what the DEI challenge looks like. Again, there's 2 prerequisites. Number 1 is conducting an annual diversity survey of all of the firm ethnicity, gender, metrics, et cetera. And number 2 is conducting a qualitative employee survey to assess firms' diversity perceptions as well too. The 10 points of action in the challenge, and they have certain point thresholds associated with them. The first one is partnering with minority-owned firms on projects. The second one is creating a diverse team of prime, sub-consultants, et cetera. The third one is providing paid internships for architecture students from HBCUs or local architecture schools. The fourth one is increasing recruitment of Black and underrepresented people of color for design staff, all positions within a firm. Number 5 is creating a mentorship program within the firm to support, employees in their own career development. Number 6 is increasing in career advancement and promotion of minority staff members to management and leadership positions within a firm. Number 7 is including, more representation of minority employees in marketing materials, social media, publications. Number 8 is conducting diversity training. Number 9 is providing pro bono design services and interfacing, in underserved communities. And, I think sort of the first half of the event this morning, provided a lot of great context for how to do that in a successful way. And then the last one on the list is joining our SoCal NOMA as our organization as an annual chapter partner to support all of our initiatives. We have a number of things we do year round, from our sort of signature summer camp initiatives with students to helping professionals get licensed and supporting continuing education programs, et cetera. So becoming a partner with us on all those things. For 2020, we were really honored to have 19 firms sign up right out of the gate to be our allies, to be our partners in this program. And you can see all the different firms listed here on the screen. The terminology has kind of varied as we've gone through this process. It was, hey, you're a participant in the challenge. Hey, you're an ally with what we're doing with our SoCal NOMA chapter. But really, I think the most important word is partner, because especially in this first year as a pilot program, all of the participating firms are partners with us. We are supporting them. They're supporting us and helping us grow and make this program and this initiative as good as it could be, and keep advancing this whole, conversation forward in the industry. So like I said, we had 19 firms representative for our 2020 challenge. Here are some of the metrics. Here's some of the results that we've learned, from the 2020 participants. So, we had, at the end of the day, we had 19 firms that submitted all of their information back to us. That accounted for about 1,500 employees across all of those firms. So it's a pretty good cross section of firms. We had firms as small as 8 people all the way up to over 350 people. participating firms of all different backgrounds, from institutional projects, multifamily projects, civic, single family residential, every project type that you can think of participating. And so you can see the breakdown of the sort of ethnicity of a lot of the participants and employees of those firms. So, about of all the employees across the firms, 56%, were white Caucasian, 4% African American, 13% Hispanic Latinx, 21% Asian Pacific Islander, less than 1% Native American, 4% identified as multiracial, and 2% as other, which includes Middle Eastern, South Asian, and a number of different categories. And I put sort of on the bottom line there just the comparative numbers of what's going on within LA County, so you can see how that looks compared to the overall population breakdown of the county. So while you see, there's a 9%, African American population within the LA County area, only 4% participation within this sort of initial sample of the local AEC industry. 48% Hispanic Latinx population within LA County, but only 13% participation within this initial data set. So you can see where some of these inequities and lack of diversity show up, just on this initial sort of pass at some of the benchmarking data. The second thing we did was, conducted a number of surveys of all of the employees to get their sort of feedback in perception of how their firms were performing in the DEI sector. And so we got about 600 responses from employees across all the different participating firms. And some interesting highlights came out of those surveys. Number one is, 80% of the employees felt that their firms had a long-term goal for DEI. So I think that's a positive. But you turn to the next page and it says, hey, 47% of the employees believe that their firms promote DEI in a strong way. So I think there's still a gap to address between, yes, we have a goal for DEI, but are we actively promoting that in a strong way? Still has some room for improvement. 52% of the employees believe that their company is making progress with diversity initiatives. 43% believe employees of different backgrounds are encouraged to apply for higher positions. I think that's a number we would certainly want to see much higher than 43%. When employees were surveyed about which group was recognized for their DEI actions, most often women are the top group recognized out of all the different gender and ethnicity breakdowns. 33% towards women. 74% of the respondents believe that DEI is important for corporate social responsibility. I think that's important because we all need to be looking at sort of what's the value proposition for diversity, not just doing it to meet a numerical goal or to check a box, but what's the value proposition of DEI. And then the next one I think is important also, that 71% of the respondents listed that DEI is the top business driver for internal efficiencies via diverse perspectives. And I think that's something that obviously was touched on in the last session about community representation. But, I think the sense that we got was that the employees were definitely appreciative of the fact that a diverse perspective within a design firm, is important for, driving business. And so I think that's really important to recognize. 69% of the respondents recognize that policy is the top action for DEI, within a firm, creating policies and procedures to support all those things. And then, maybe not surprisingly, the top barrier to increase DEI, as noted by their respondents, is lack of knowledge. And so that's something we all have a role in increasing the knowledge base that's out there for promoting DEI within our industry. I left the sort of firm metrics at the top again, just for reference. But some of the strategic actions that all of the firms participated in, again, we had firms of different sizes from 8 to 350 employees. And so there was a different levels of feasibility and impact based on the size of the firms. A firm that's 8 people hiring 2 or 3 people is a big deal versus a firm that's 300 people hiring 2 or 3 people. So, we saw a sort of a spectrum of responses based on firm size as well too. We had firms that scored across the entire spectrum from 0 points all the way up to almost 300 points, even though we kind of set the max threshold for recognition at 100 points. And I want to pause here just to make one statement, which is that of all of the firms that were participating, regardless of their scores, and scores have been shared with the firms, and we will be making that transparent in 2021. But of all the firms that participated, I am really most proud of every single firm, regardless of their score, that decided to take the first step forward in making improvements. The goal is not necessarily to say this is what my score is this year. The goal is to look at what is your performance year over year. If you had the top score this year, hopefully you'll have the top score next year. If you had a low score this year and your score goes up, next year, that's equally impressive. So that's the goal, is year over year performance tracking. It's not just a one-time score to compare everybody. The average firm score was 71 points. So that, I think that's a pretty good, sort of, again, of this initial data set, sort of a good look at, what firms are doing. The top 3 strategies used by firms are career advancement. So there was a lot of promotions within firms to management and leadership positions. Mentorship programs, a lot of the participating firms had developed mentorship programs in-house to support their employees. And then the use of marketing materials and increasing a representation across all of the different media. Some of the least used strategies were internships. And we think, certainly speaking with a lot of firms, a lot of the hiring and internships was definitely impacted by the pandemic last year, and still ongoing, to be honest. So hopefully that will look different, in 2021 and beyond. Pro bono services were things that, a number of firms did, but not at a large quantity. So I think that's something we could all work on improving, at our involvement in the community and supporting community organizations. And then collaborating on projects with minority-owned firms. That's an area, certainly locally here in the Southern California area, that's going to be something that we all collectively have to continue to grow. There's only about a half a dozen, minority-owned architecture firms here in the LA area, outside of sort of sole practitioners. So when you look at, who can we team up with, who can we partner with, that's a small list that we all need to collectively work on to continue to grow. A couple of lessons learned from 2020. The first one, and really the most important one, is there are no winners and there are no losers. We don't hand out a trophy for who got the top score. There is no penalty for getting the lowest score. No matter what your score is, no matter what you did or didn't do in 2020, the idea is for all of us to keep on improving. That includes us as an organization, sort of supporting this and administering this as well too. The second one on the list is just that, even though we call it a challenge, the idea is that for all these firms to function as a cohort, to support each other in the process and grow the excellence across the entire industry, not to say I'm better than you, or I'm going to withhold resources from somebody else, but to share information, to collaborate together and grow the industry collectively. Some specific challenges were just sort of in the data process. Different firms of different sizes have more or less levels of nimbleness in what they could do. Some of the smaller firms, had no issues. Hey, we can make this change today, and the principal can make a decision, and that's what was going to happen. Some of the larger firms will say, hey, we need to go back and talk to our board or our leadership group or whatever before we can make a decision. And so there's sort of pros and cons on both sides. Access to data was a challenge. Some information about ethnicity and gender, sexual orientation, it was not always readily available. So we need to figure out better ways to collect that. And then certainly financial considerations about the impacts of hiring staff or projects to work on, et cetera. We're going to be working on automating some of the data collection and scoring going forward. We're working on providing some more clarity to diversity statistics and tracking, providing some additional ethnicity choices, some clarity on sexual orientation and gender identity, and also separating out accounts specifically of licensed architects, because we do want to make sure we're tracking that number, across all of this exercise as well too. One of the statistics that we looked at last year as an organization is, in the state of California, there's about 21,000 licensed architects, but only about 300 of those are African-American. So we do need to look very specifically at increasing the number of licensed architects as a result of this program as well. I talked a little bit about encouraging firms to share information, and then just developing more resources, a stronger directory of minority architecture firms, directory of sub-consultants, recommendations for different DEI trainers that may be out there, all those different things. And then obviously just the economic realities of the pandemic and impacts that all of us faced in that. And so hopefully we'll see some different results in 2021. And so while I share with you all these highlights, we are not publishing any of the individual firm scores for 2020, but starting in 2021, we will be publishing firm metrics and their performance on sort of a tier-based structure. And I'll show a little bit of that in a second. So people can we can be transparent with all of the data and performance so that we can all learn from how everything is going forward. So for 2021, the DEI challenge is going to look very similar. The same two prerequisites, the same 10 action items are all still intact. We've sort of restructured the initiative a little bit just to focus those action items in a couple categories. The first one being team building, second one being staffing, third one being training and support, and then the fourth one being community, to really focus where people's energy is spent and understanding where those impacts can occur. A couple other updates for 2021. We've been fortunate enough to actually now have 6 new firms join us as of yesterday. I had to update this at the last second. So we've had an additional 6 new firms. We're at 25 firms to date. Enrollment is ongoing and open. If you're interested in becoming a part of this DEI challenge, you can contact us today. We can get you all set up and going. The process is documented on a calendar year basis. So, you can sign up in December if you'd like to, and still be able to track your performance for the entire year of 2021. And then, as I mentioned, all the firms are going to be recognized as allies of our SoCal-NOMA chapter at 4 different levels. Certainly last but not least, there's no cost to join the DEI challenge. And you can learn more about all of our program documentation and download the commitment letters to sign up on our SoCalNOMA.org website. And then the last thing I want to share is what the future is going to look like a little bit. So this is a draft, and I think what the final version will look like will be hopefully similar, but maybe slightly different. So count everybody sort of fortunate that you are among the first people to see this draft version. NOMA National, in conjunction with our chapter and others across the country, is developing a DEI challenge that will hopefully roll out by either the summertime or third quarter of this year, so that firms all across the country can participate in this same initiative. Obviously with the same goals of increasing diversity, equity, inclusion across the industry, but will allow firms that have offices outside of the Southern California area, have offices across the country to participate in this challenge. As it's in its draft format right now, this is what the structure is looking like. So number 1, there are 6 prerequisites. A couple starting with the acknowledgement of firms about their commitment to DEI and their participating in the challenge. A commitment to zero tolerance policies on discrimination, racial bias, etc. Conducting office-wide DEI training on an annual basis. Conducting the qualitative benchmarking of diversity statistics. Conducting annual qualitative employee surveys for diversity evaluation. And then providing quarterly internal firm opportunities for listening, for dialogues and communication on DEI topics. So those would all be mandatory items for all participating firms of the NOMA National Challenge. And then there are levels from there. So 3 levels. There's the standard level. So we would mean that you would do the prerequisite plus all the following items. First one being hire BIPOC employees to full-time staff members, establishing office cultural norms for BIPOC members, a mentorship program, promotions to management and senior leadership levels, and then pay equity analysis. So those would all be sort of as part of the tier 1 level strategies. Tier 2 level strategies are all of the prerequisites, the tier 1 level strategies, and then also doing internships and internships for students and emerging professionals, joining a local NOMA chapter and supporting their programs, integrating BIPOC books, materials into the sort of firm libraries and certain and firm resources, and then in being intentional about marketing materials and promotions and things of that nature. And then the third level is excellence. So doing the prerequisites plus level 1 and level 2. And then doing the following, being engaged in state and local policies and legislation, collaborating with minority-owned firms, including more diverse subcontractors and consultants, and then finally doing pro bono work in local communities. So that's where we are right now. Like I said, I think it's still in progress. We hope that it will launch nationally by the summertime or fall at the latest. And again, that will be open up for firms to be able to participate in nationwide, no matter where they're located, no matter how many different offices that they have. So there are a number of benefits and frequently asked questions. I'm going to kind of breeze through this. I want to get to the panel discussion here. But, there's a number of things that are on the table. The idea behind this is that we need to keep score so that it's not just practice. It's more than just statements and words about what we commit to doing, but actually measuring what we are doing and tracking that performance over time. One thing that's interesting, we are looking at some procurement reform opportunities here in Los Angeles about adding additional sort of criteria to RFP scorings based on participation in the DEI challenge or other similar initiatives. So we hope that'll be something that will roll out in the future. Certainly I hope this is important to everybody here, but showing that your firm is a leader in this industry and being a part of shaping what this conversation goes forward. And then, here's a number of frequently asked questions that we can certainly talk about amongst the panel as well, that I touched on a few of these already. And the last thing I just want to leave you with is sort of a not so subtle sort of kick in the pants to say, here's who's already joined us. And we hope all of you that are out there in the audience today that are not on this list will choose to be a part of the DEI challenge with us in 2021 and beyond, and join your colleagues here that you see. We're thankful for all of the support that AIALA has given us in pushing this initiative forward. We're thankful for all of the firms that are participating here. We're learning from you, we're partnering with you. You are shaping this conversation, and we're grateful for your participation, and we look forward to continuing this partnership going forward. So with that, I'm going to stop and give it back to Carmen.
Thank you, Lance. So we will start introductions of our speakers now. We will start with Mitra. Can I call you future Madam President yet? If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself and also answer two basic questions. The first one being, why is DEI crucial to the future of our profession, and where is your firm currently in their DEI challenge process?
Sure. Thank you so much, Carmen. It's great to be here. It's great to be part of this conversation. My name is Mitra Memari. I am a partner at ZGF Architects. As Carmen mentioned, I am also a board member at AIALA, VP this year and president next year, which is a big honor. Thank you. To answer your questions, as far as DEI being crucial for our future, I want to take a step back and in architecture, we use acronyms all the time. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by doing that. So to me, when we talk about diversity, that's when we have a lot of different groups of people with different backgrounds and thoughts at the table, with different viewpoints. And that's really critical in how the future will be shaped. When we talk about equity, I think it means to create conditions that are level and impartial. The society up to now has not been that way. There are a lot of injustices, as we see every day, not only in the world that we live in, but in the work we do in architecture, in our profession, and trying to create more equity is really critical in the future. And then inclusion. It's not that you just have a diverse group of people at the table, but that those people have a voice, that they are take part in the decision making, that they're just not to check the box that, hey, we made this happen. And then there, combining all of that, the diversity, the inclusion, and the equity, there's a business case for it. When you have diverse ideas at the table, you have more creativity that's supported by that. These days, any RFP, any RFQ that we have received has a big portion dedicated to diversity, inclusion, and equity because the clients are looking for it. The users are looking for it. Also, I recently was on some mentoring panels for women in architecture, and all of the students who were and took part in that, one of their first questions to me was, "What are you guys doing for diversity, inclusion, and equity?" It's something that our next generation is really looking at all of us to take a big part on. So that to me is why the future is going to need to have us pay attention and make roadways into this. As far as what ZGF has been doing, we signed on to the challenge, I think, shortly after it came out. I personally, and I know our firm was very excited about having a metrics that we can measure ourselves against. We always talk so much about we're a champion of diversity, inclusion, equity, as well as justice, but are we really, and how are we making strides? We used 2020 as sort of our benchmarking year to see, okay, what have we achieved thus far? In 2021, we made a goal at the beginning of the year of where we wanted to be at the end of the year with all of the credits that Lance just outlined. We're meeting with the task force that's developed on a monthly basis to make sure that we're following through and measuring ourselves in that progress.
Thank you. So now we'll move over to Parini. If you can introduce yourself and answer the same two questions.
Unmute myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Parini Mehta, and I am an associate principal at Co-Architects. As Carmen mentioned, we're a local firm, but I would like to stress that we do work all over the country and we hire people from all over the country. So it is super important for us to be a part of this conversation on DEI and how we can bring DEI to Co-Architects and provide an environment that helps all employees show up as their true selves. And I think that Carmen might provide the answer in addition to everything that Mitra said, which I completely agree with. One of my goals and one of our goals at the office is to create that environment where people feel comfortable, they feel like they do have a seat at the table, they can show up as their true selves. And the results from that is the engagement of all of the people that work with us, the productivity, the collaboration, and the innovative ideas that we are always looking for as architects within our practice. Our primary clients at Co-Architects are mission-driven institutions. So whether it's a healthcare system, a university, K through 12 school district, they are looking for within their own institutions how to better improve themselves with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we see ourselves as a key partner in those conversations. So it's really important, and I'm really proud to be a part of this panel. And I need to recognize Antoinette and Rachel from Co-Architects who have been spearheading and working with Lance on the SoCal NOMA DEI challenge. Where we are in the process, we are one of the 5 new firms that Lance mentioned that joined for 2021. And right now we're collecting data. We've signed up for the challenge. We're collecting our data. We've done a mock survey of where we performed in 2020, just so we could see where we were and where we need to grow. And we've also kind of taken a forward look at where we would like to be for this this year. And we're working steadily to meet our goals for that, for the challenge. I can't stress enough how important the challenge is. Metrics is so key. As a woman architect, when I first, probably about 10 years ago, my focus was equity between gender. And at Co-Architects, we did set metrics on what we would like to see within the makeup of our firm between men and women. And in the time that I've been at Co-Architects, we have met and exceeded that goal. We actually have more women that work at Co-Architects than men. That's why I think metrics are so important for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Having a goal to work towards really sets the barometer. At Co-Architects, we've been doing a lot of the requirements kind of on a grassroots ad hoc basis. There's many people in our firm that are very passionate about some of the initiatives that are already outlined in the SoCal NOMA challenge, but this really provides us with the umbrella and a way for us to categorize and be very systematic about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if there are ways that we can improve. And I think it's really created a cohesive effort for our firm to make changes within our own firm makeup and our culture.
Thank you, Parini. And last but not least, Erin, will you speak of your experience as an educator and how your school is advancing the DEI challenge currently?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm so proud to be a part of this panel as well. I am a professor at California Baptist University. I worked practicing for about 17 years prior to that. Just recently started teaching, I would say maybe 3 years ago. So I'm sort of in a good transitional moment to look at practice and education simultaneously. And so with that, as the other speakers have mentioned, there's some very specific things dealing with the way our firms engage the relevance of metrics and how it affects and shapes our profession. But I also want to link us back to, if you were with us earlier, for the first panel discussion, the effect that the DEI challenge will have on shaping the built environment, right? First and foremost, as a profession, if this changes, and if our curriculum, which we'll talk about later on as well, begins to change in schools, our ability to engage community, to design for community, to empower community will completely change the way the built environment is looking now and it operates later. We are also in the academia side of it, looking at removing the whitewashing of history. And so if you think about the way we're educated, what does, I was in Italy as a student, studied there for a while, but if Italy or if Eurocentric thinking is the only thing that we're looking at, we're not looking at the total history of what we all as humans have contributed to our current advancement. And so that also changes and empowers the psyche and the souls of individuals who work in the built environment and those who engage the built environment, which is everybody on the planet, right? Finally, this also ripples, if this DEI challenge actually rippled through, imagine this, every single discipline and market sector with the same amount of passion that it has in this sort of birthing place of SoCal right now. Imagine the effects that we would have on global markets and the fairness that would start to, and enhancement of innovation that would start to happen with all of these different people, diversity and ingredients. Think about your food, right? We love the seasonings. The seasonings are what make the food sparkle in some way in our mouth. And so if we had all the ingredients in one package, together, imagine what our industries would look like. And then finally, there is a real economic impact. There's a quality of life impact, and there's an ability to live impact, which I think Lance Collins just pointed out, stating that there were, I think he said, 181 killings of Black people by police since the murder of George Floyd. And so we're talking about quality of life impact, economic impact. We're talking about ability to live. And one may think that, oh, what, all of that from the DEI challenge? Absolutely. And so I'd love to get into the discussion so we can talk about some of these things more.
That is a great segue. So let's jump right in. So we'll stay here with the educational piece that you brought up. So I think, Lance, you mentioned that one of the lowest points in what you've surveyed so far was the internships. And then for Mitra and Prini, both of your firms are very involved in internships and, you know, Socal Noma summer camp and bringing the next generation on. So how do you tie what you're all doing to focusing on that piece that Lance has already identified was potentially slightly lower than anticipated based on the pandemic, but potentially other things? How does that play into everything that you are doing with the DEI challenge?
For internship, Carmen, I guess I'll jump in just to share a little bit of what we have done. ZGF made a commitment about 3 years ago to have a student from an HBCU intern in each of our US offices. So we've developed a really good relationship with all of the deans at the universities, and we start our recruitment of the internships very early on, back like in December, where we contact the deans. We start getting names of students who may be interested, and then interviewing them, and then making sure we connect them to the right offices. Because we're in the 3 years, and this year I'm happy to say we have 2 HBCU students in our LA office. It's been great to keep in touch with those students as they progress in their career. And this is one of the biggest lessons that I think I've learned doing this work. And there's a lot of more lessons that I will continue to learn and grow. But I think it's not just this one time. You know, if we're really trying to make a change in the profession and how it looks like, bringing minorities as an intern one summer isn't going to do all of it. It's this continuous engagement with those individuals to be of help and support. So my thinking is that whoever comes to our door, this is a very Iranian sort of analogy. You know, I was born in Iran, but you know, whoever comes to your door, you open the door, you welcome them, and you feed them, and you kind of cherish that relationship. And that's kind of how I view these. That you know, the summer interns come in, and it's not like, okay, bye, good luck, we gave you all this information, but how can I keep in touch with you? How can I continue to be a resource to you and see you grow in this profession and contribute to it?
We're lucky at Co-Architects that we are constantly expanding our internship, our paid internship program. And we've been recruiting at historically Black colleges and universities for the last few years. I think of primary importance I'd like to stress is our staffing principal is a member of our internal Co-Architects JEDI committee. So there is a real commitment there to make sure that our staffing principal is tied in with our JEDI group, and staffing decisions are considered with the lens of our JEDI initiatives. We are continuing to recruit at historically Black colleges and universities, but also looking at other colleges and universities across the country and looking for diversity within the pool that we see and what new talent and new ideas we can bring to Co-Architects. Developing the relationships, Mitra, as you said, is super important. What was stressed to us in our meetings with deans is not just hiring an intern and then teaching them for a summer and seeing them on their way, but developing and forging relationships with them, bringing them back summer after summer. And we're proud that most of our interns that we have in our office, we do end up hiring as full-time employees. We have several members of our co-worker team that were interns in the past and are now full-time employees within our practice.
I wanted to kind of build on a little bit what Aaron was talking about with the power of the built environment, and ultimately sort of the goal that we all want to get to with having buildings that are reflective of our culture and needing the representation to reach that, and kind of tie this into the previous session about community organization and design. What we've been doing within SoCalNOMA for, I guess we're on year 12 now, is our summer camp initiative, which is, we typically have 100 to 150 students every year from middle school through high school, exposing them to architecture and introducing them to that possible career path, and then hopefully getting them into college and getting them to these internships and all those things. But to kind of bring it back to the community side of things, if we talk about, families coming to these community meetings to talk about, hey, we're doing a new development at Jordan Downs or Watts or whatever it is. I guarantee you there's some kids that got dragged to that meeting by their parents because, they didn't have any other childcare opportunities, that could learn that these buildings have power. They have the ability to shape what their community can look like going forward. And so we need to keep sort of priming that pipeline for that kid who has that light bulb go off to be able to say, hey, I can go to a college to learn about this. I can get an internship at a firm. I can know that this is a possible career choice. So the more people that are sort of moving around in that environment to open all these doors, whether it's the way we engage our communities, whether it's recruitment and acceptance in the schools, and then getting to that internship and ultimately hiring position, it's all part of that same continuum of that pipeline that we need to be thinking about.
And go ahead, Mitra.
I'll just say quickly, Aaron, just to talking about the pipeline, we developed about 5 years ago, a shadowing program that went along with the summer camp, the SoCal summer camp. And it's been really great to have 3 or 4 students come to our office, learn what's a day in the life of architects. What we also do is we have our diverse staff kind of share their journeys, because I think that's part of, we all have unique stories of how we became architects. And I think it's really important for people to relate to each other, and you don't know where that relation is going to happen. But again, our idea is to continue to be in touch with those summer camp sort of shadowing program students. Matteo, who was mentioned, is in this conference and is attending Woodbury this first year, was with us last year. We were able to do it virtually. But I wanted to, and then the other important thing is that, we learn from each other. So Antoinette and Rachel from Co and Janice at the time adopted this a couple of years ago to share it, to have their shadowing program at their offices. And I love that about these conversations we have, because we all learn and grow and can continue to support the effort that we're all behind.
It's incredible. I think Mitra and Parini, you both have stated how the internship piece sort of is the middle portion of this journey in a way. And Lance bringing up Project Pipeline, when we designed that curriculum for our students to introduce them to the world of design, we're giving them that opportunity that ushers them into that academic experience, into the possibility for the internship, right? And then the mentoring piece that continues, and we're trying to push even at from professors and faculty to partners and middle management in firms to continue that mentorship process, is a all-encompassing aspect of it. And we actually see that as part of the larger curriculum of Project Pipeline as well. And the fact that it's in the DEI challenge, I think even pushes it to be an even stronger focal point to help change the numbers in licensure, but not only just to change that license number, but to actually do everything else that we've spoken about in terms of shaping the built environment and empowering people to realize their contributions to our advancement as humans.
Yes, I completely agree with Aaron, everything that you just said, and your note about removing the whitewash layer from curriculums really struck a chord with me. just thinking about our own high school architectural discovery program, which we've been holding at CO for the last 7 years. It started as a program to introduce young high school women to architecture, but with everything that the JEDI group has been kind of promoting, we decided to expand that group to young women and young men with a focus on NOMA students, STEM school, LAUSD students. And in thinking about our project types and what we want to show them about architecture, it's not just a day in the life of architects. Mitra, as you said, sharing our own personal stories about how we decided to enter the profession, but also showcasing architects and projects in different communities around Los Angeles, really opening their eyes to the richness of our own city and the architecture in our country and in other countries, aside from what they are probably already exposed to in the European culture, is a focus for us. So it's not just having the diversity of the students in our program, but the diversity of the examples that we can give them of what an architect is, and what architecture is equally as important.
Great. Thank you all for your thoughts. So let's talk about the present a little bit. So I think a lot of the discussions focus on the future and the pipeline, but let's talk about what is going on today in your firms and in your school, and how your colleagues today are looking to the smaller steps that are being taken to actually progress the DEI initiatives versus the longer range view of what happens with that pipeline. So how are you guys sort of looking at your 1 year mark or your 2 year mark for changes you want to be making? And I think, Erin, for you, is it just curriculum, or is it also education of faculty? How are you looking at those smaller steps to get to that larger goal of the big picture DEI?
Yes, and this is immensely important because it's those sort of either baby steps or biggie yard foot steps that we have to take in order to move this thing forward. And so for CAVID, College of Architecture, Visual Arts and Design at California Baptist University, we found ourselves looking at this list thinking, oh my goodness, look how many of these things we are actually doing right now. And so our architecture department in and of itself, and the dean of our college, were fully on board to sign up for this challenge right away and move forward. And so now we're still in discussions with the larger university administration to help them to understand what this means, not only to our profession, but in a sort of much larger context. And so when we looked at the list, we are currently heavily involved in more strategic recruitment now. Our dean admittedly in a conversation said, I really didn't think about it when I was recruiting, because our program is young. We just had maybe 2 years ago, our first group of graduates. We just became accredited last year, and or a couple of years ago, and had the NAB board come back to give us another review this year. And so he admitted, like, when I was doing the recruitment, I was going around to local high schools, but I didn't necessarily intentionally go to people of color's environments and schools. But even without him being intentional, I think our first graduating class before I came might have had 4 to 6 African-American or women of color, which was kind of people started to ask him, how are you doing this? How did that happen? How did you, for such a small institution, to start out with that number of young Black girls in architecture? How did you pull that off? And it was completely by accident. But now we're so much more intentional with the recruitment piece. We're intentional with the faculty piece. We're looking at, the gate's still open. If anybody knows faculty who is a Christian who wants to become a teacher, or a practicing person who wants to switch over, the gates are still open. We're looking for a faculty member to join us. And we've been very pointed about thinking about the diversity factor in the faculty. In fact, when I was brought on, there were 3 Black men brought in on that same year in 2018. And so the hiring of the actual faculty to teach made a difference. And there's several other things that we are doing that's already actually on our particular challenge in terms of engagement, connection. We're really pushing forward on so many things. So for us, it's been a thing of, okay, we're doing all of this. Let's hurry up and sign up. Let's hurry up and get involved. But I do want to touch on something else in terms of that curriculum piece, as well as this translates to practice. Just because you hire a staff member in a university or a person of a particular ethnicity in a firm does not necessarily mean that they have the education or background to do certain things when it comes to teaching curriculum that's diverse. A lot of us have Eurocentric backgrounds in terms of education. It's the way most of us were trained, right? So let's not be fake about that. But what we do need to be intentional about as we shift, and we're talking about this in our department as well, as who do we bring on that is capable, and how do we ourselves become more well-known and well-versed in what we're teaching? Do we open up new workshops, seminars, independent studies, whatever the case may be, to gain that knowledge and help us move this needle forward in that portion of it? And I can, being someone who worked for a number of years working on a mentorship program at Gensler, I can see the same thing actually happening in practice, and how we can strategically focus our intentions and our hires on people who have a skill set to increase and help us understand not just African-American culture, but other cultures that are all coming together in these different workplaces, which reflect our globe.
Anybody else wants to jump into that conversation, or we want to tackle the next big one?
I'll add, and just sort of this is a little bit of editorial from what we've learned so far in 2020, is the push for diversity, equity, inclusion is obviously critical. And I think increasing all the metrics is obviously critical, but there's a couple of wrinkles in there that I don't think are elaborated on enough. And I don't know if this is a short-term goal, but in my mind, in my wish list, it's a short-term goal. So that is most specifically focusing on increasing the number of Black-owned and minority-owned architecture firms out there. And so we've seen firm numbers, large and small, kind of stay flat over time. The common statistic is about 2% of the licensed architects are African-American, and that's been true since 1970, probably before that. But at least as far as we've been tracking the data, it goes back to 1970. But what we've also seen is a decline in the number of minority-owned firms, specifically here in LA, but nationwide as well too, where, even here in Southern California, if you look in the 80s and early 90s, there were, dozens of Black-owned firms, not just sole practitioners, but firms that have now, and we talk about Paul Williams, we talk about all these different people over time, that these firms have disappeared. And so not only just increasing the metrics from sort of a quantitative perspective is important, and hiring more people and doing all these things, but supporting people in their own career development, professional growth, teaching business leadership skills, all these sorts of things to increase the development of firms that can, play some of these roles integrated into the community, serving, minority communities, whatever it is also equally critical to this conversation.
One thing that I'll add here, I think all of these points are really great. And Lance, I know a lot of firms are trying to collaborate with underrepresented people of color, Black firms, and to create these bonds and relationships. And I think it's been one of the difficulties we're all facing, but the intention is there, and hopefully I think we'll get there. But, you know, one of the things that I think that the equity, diversity, inclusion needs to also focus on is our work as architects. You know, what we do every day, despite, you know, regardless of the diversity we have in our firms, in our organizations, the inclusivity, the equity, those are really important. But I think equally it's important to express, explain, understand what that means in our projects every day. You know, the first panel did such a great job about talking about community engagement. You know, and sometimes community engagement is when you do affordable housing, or if you're doing, you know, a big project in a central part of the city. To me, community engagement, which I think is less active, is, you know, on the university campus we're working on. You know, for example, at USC, it's in downtown. How does it address community with those buildings? How does it engage? And, you know, currently it doesn't, but, you know, how can we engage with those organizations, you know, healthcare organizations, big companies that we work with that can bring the community in, and then community needs to be defined. What is community for that development? So I think that for me, that's one of my focuses of sort of looking in the future. How does our design process incorporate equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Thank you, Mitra. So I'd like to ask maybe a little bit more of a harder question, not necessarily a positive question, but given the focus that there is today on DEI, EDI, JEDI, whichever one of the organizations you've picked for your firm, do you all feel like this will fundamentally change our profession in the future, or does it feel like it is the fad of the moment?
I truly believe this is the hard work and the impact that we can make on our firms, on our profession, locally, nationally, and across the world. I can't stress enough that even though it's very daunting and challenging, this effort I think is here to stay. That Carmen, to me, that's like saying, you know, will women not be part of the workforce anymore? Yes, we have challenges. We always will have to work hard to make sure that we have a voice at the table, and the same goes for diverse voices at the table as well. It's not going away. We have to embrace our diversity and bring that makeup to our offices. So I appreciate the question, but I think that the SoCalNOMA DEI challenge steps, you know, makes us accountable and gives us the stepping stones to create those environments within our office. But it's constant progress and constant work. Things like, you know, we were talking a little bit about the verdict earlier when this conference started, and things like that I think give hope. But things like the DEI challenge and the steps we make within our own communities is the work that's going to really make a difference in our society.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, you know, I obviously, I guess, would say yes. I think it's going to make a difference. I do believe that, but not even in the manner of the SoCalNOMA DEI challenge or NOMA DEI challenge, but that hopefully this will become a tool that can be used for lots of different things, lots of different industries. And the types of changes we're talking about certainly are not limited to just the architecture profession. They cover a lot of different spectrum, and change needs to be, you know, realized at a lot of different levels. So kind of as I led off in the preface to the presentation, you know, I think we're still really in the infancy stages of everything, and just getting some of the first raw sets of raw data on the table. I mean, we've been trying for a number of years just to even get an answer from, California Architects Board, like how many African-American licensed architects are there? That data isn't public. So we're still just in our infancy stages of getting to numbers to assess how we're doing, not even talking about, are we changing, are we doing better yet, but just assessing how we're doing. We're still in that stage. And so we obviously have a long way to go. But, to me, and, Mitra, to what you said, to me, the real reflection of, is this going to be a success, or what does success look like, is going to be ultimately in the designs that we all create and how we shape our built environment going forward. Just saying, hey, we hired 10 new people of color for our office. Hey, we went from 10% to 20%. That's not a change. That's maybe a step in the pathway, but that's not the change we're trying to get to. We're talking about how, as architects, and understanding the power that we have in creating the built environment, how can we influence that? So that's going to be sort of where the results are ultimately going to be measured. And the thing I always kind of tell myself, and this is kind of one of my sort of favorite quotes that I use for a lot of things, but I think it's certainly really applicable here, is, in the book Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver, there's a quote that says, the diameter of your knowledge is determined by the circumference of your activity. And to me, that represents what we're trying to do with diversity, which is increase the diameter of all of our knowledge. And more voices that are part of this conversation, more participation in this process, is going to collectively make us more knowledgeable as an industry. And hopefully that means designing better buildings, better environments, more environments that are more sort of culturally appropriate, and all of these different things we're trying to accomplish. I think the diversity and the equity and inclusion is really just that first ingredient and to get to where we ultimately want to go.
The only thing I will add is that, the SoCal NOMA DEI Challenge is one of the tools that we use to continuously improve, diversity, inclusion, equity, justice in the work environment. So I see that as definitely a positive, but I don't see it as an all-encompassing that that's all we need to do, that there's a lot of other factors in this pie of sort of trying to get to where we want to go that needs to be activated.
Thank you all. I feel like this is a conversation we could continue to have for the entire day. There's so much ground to cover.
Point? Sorry.
Of course.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I think we have to realize, specifically for this question, we are currently in an extraordinarily pivotal point in our history. This is the go point. We have mentioned before how there are turning points in the civil rights movement, but this is a global moment. And in that, we are having a day of reckoning across the globe with the thought process of imperialism. Imperialism is being rejected at this very moment. And so we're engaging in a cultural uprising, if you will, that is shaping, shifting, transforming several things. And the DEI challenge may seem like something that's brilliant in the architecture community, but if you think about the possibilities of its effects and ability to ripple through all the market sectors, all the professions at some level or another, we could have an incredibly profound, quicker change than we thought possible. And what that looks like in all of our professions would be absolutely amazing. When you think about the fact that several groups have come out, like Citi did a study last year, found out that because of racism towards Blacks specifically, our economy was down $16 trillion. 16 trillion, not billion, trillion. NPR then took that study and said, you know what? In the same year, our GDP was 19 trillion. So we're talking about almost having twice the amount of money circulate through our entire economy. That's enough change in and of itself to think about how every single person in our own nation could be so much wealthier and think about how the quality of life could transform us all in that sense. How many other countries could we help, let alone our own neighborhoods, as we talk about the built environment? So do I think this is going to have and can continue to have the impact? Absolutely, absolutely, all day long. We just have to be vigilant, focused, and very, very much about our Father's business in this case.
You are getting a lot of amens and preach on in the chat room. So it's a beautiful way to close out this conversation. We've reached our end for today for the conference. We will continue to have this conversation through WOVA. We will open up a meetup and allow everyone to continue the conversation. I'm sure there are a lot of questions and some further discussions that could be had. So thank you to all the panelists for joining us today and sharing your experiences with the DEI Challenge. And thank you for all of the attendees for being with us today. Please come back tomorrow as we talk a little bit about DEI in the community, with the community, and also that subject that we all love to talk about, contracts and how we get more of them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh, who will do our closing remarks for the day. And don't forget to wish him a happy birthday again.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you. You hit the nail on the head with everything you just said. And just, yeah, today's been absolutely amazing. Thank you to Sticks and the Think Watts Foundation for setting the tone this morning and kicking off the day. It was a really good start. And thank you to the dynamic and genuine panelists, the moderators, and especially yourselves being active attendees throughout. That definitely makes topics and discussions like this very useful and helpful to have. And so a special thank you out to all of our sponsors for making this happen, to the AIA President Wade, who's also my boss, for letting me skip out of work for a few hours. Thank you to SoCal NOMA President Lance, our entire JEDI committee, roughly 15 active members who are brainstorming impactful programming that we're able to put together. And last but not least, a special thank you to the hardworking planning team and the AIALA support staff that made this happen. That includes Leslie, Janelle, Zeba, Carmen, Janice, Dawn, Hector, Renee, Will, Karine, Jessica, Tibby, Nick, and just that entire team that we have been able to put this together. So tomorrow, same time, same place, bring the same energy as we highlight the Friends of Mafundi at the top of the morning, then lead into panel discussions as Carmen spoke about on equitable contracts, funding, projects procurement, and then closing out the entire conference with a really special DEI in the community panel that will allow us to close in hearing from non-architects and designers that are doing work in the community and how we can transfer their best practices and their experiences into our profession. So with that, we're going to close